Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
William looked at a makeshift counter made of a wooden crate. It was the kind of thing that brought fruit, bread, milk, and groceries to the stores. In general, the man could not believe his eyes. But covered with colorful counter customers among the old teddy dogs and bears lay him. A rabbit. Not just any rabbit, but a rabbit. Kelly couldn't think of another name for him. Well, and Alice then called her favorite toy the same rabbit, sometimes adding funny words. Mr. Kelly the Rabbit. Almost 3 centuries ago, brought with godparents from a business trip to Holland. Then in my homeland, in the stores of such wonderful toys were not. And now with the modern abundance of rabbits, still somehow stood out among the mass of his plush tribesmen. Smooth fur, delicate peach color, long ears, sticking out smart black eyes. This rabbit was dressed in jeans, a white and red striped shirt. A straw hat sat firmly on his head. Slightly shifted, it was an original and very unusual toy. It was impossible to be mistaken here. It is unlikely that in this small provincial town suddenly appeared exactly the same plush animal. He had too interesting a history. The Dutchman was a foreigner after all, brought into the country many years ago. Kelly said that when she first saw the rabbit, she almost choked with joy. Godfather smilingly handed the girl a gift, not even realizing what an impression the toy made on Kelly. She hadn't parted with Mr. Rabbit the girl since then. She was no longer so small, almost 11 years old. Peers slowly threw away dolls and turned their eyes to outfits, cosmetics, some handbags. And Kelly ran home from school, and the first thing she did was to snuggle up to Mr. Rabbit. Lesh's friend sat on her desk. When the girl did her homework, he would go on long journeys with her. And certainly Kelly would take the rabbit to bed with her, with her favorite toy at her side. So sweetly crumbled. Then the girl grew up, fell in love, got married. She and William met at a club. It was banal, but at the same time very romantic. They met for a short time, and almost immediately they both realized that they were made for each other. And as time later showed, they were not mistaken. Married, and after the wedding moved into William's apartment, which he inherited from his grandmother. We were so lucky, we got our own corner right away, and it was just wonderful. The rabbit, of course, moved into the apartment of the newlyweds and took in it an honorable place, top shelves, racks, and in the living room. William also liked this plush animal. Cute, so stylish, groovy. A couple of years after the wedding, William and Kelly became parents. The family had a daughter, Alice, a wonderful, golden, cheerful girl like the babies from an advertisement or from a postcard. Chubby cheeks, pink lips, huge blue eyes framed by thick lashes. Dolls, yes, and only parents do not dote in the daughter. The girl grew, developed. Pleased mom and dad with successes and new moments. In time sat down and time went. There were no problems with her. That's what they call a gift child. When the little girl grew to toys, Mr. Rabbit inherited her. And girl, she immediately appointed the elegant beast as her best friend. Just like her mother, once Alice dragged him with her literally everywhere, and on the street took him out of the garden, and on a trip without him did not go. And William involuntarily smiled, remembering how once the 3 of them flew to the sea, suddenly packed literally in one evening. It was just a hot ticket. Both spouses had just had a vacation, a fortunate coincidence. How happy were they then? And they understood it perfectly well, consciously enjoyed the pleasant moments. Wandered around the deserted, along the shore, ankle deep in water, holding hands. Kelly, William, Alice, and of course, the rabbit. How old was the daughter then? Probably about 8. She had just finished 1st grade. Alice had a very funny smile at the time. You sweet, sweet, Mr. Rabbit was lost. Probably the girl forgot it on the beach or on the embankment, where she played with the local kids. In general, Alice has always been responsible and attentive. But there is a flight, a lot of new impressions. The climatization is tired, probably caught up already at the hotel. Alice had to go to bed, but the rabbit in the room was not. How then was the girl frightened? She cried, begged her parents right now to go in search of a friend. Never Alice was so capricious, never been so demanding. William and Kelly realized that these were not just childish tantrums. Then they had barely managed to talk their girl into waiting until morning. "But where are we going now?" exhorted the distraught Kelly, who also looked sad. After all, Mr. Rabbit meant a lot to her. "It's dark. We're tired. Tomorrow morning we'll go to the quay and look for him." "What if someone's picked him up by then?" "It'll be all right," William promised. "I'll see if it's a beautiful, unusual toy. Someone could really just take it away. And what about then? They'd never find another stuffed animal like that." In the morning they went to the beach. They looked everywhere on the embankment and where they had been swimming yesterday. On the beach, it was as if the rabbit had disappeared into the water. Or maybe it was washed out to sea by a wave, or someone threw the toy into the waves for nothing. Kelly and William had given up hope. But Alice did not give up. She searched the neighborhood and looking under every shop, inspecting the bushes, asking passers, the same question if any of them have not seen a lonely plush rabbit. Kelly and William. Sadly, they were both at a loss. How to tell their daughter it was all useless. But then a miracle happened. There's no other word for it. The family had breakfast at a cafe overlooking the sea. William barely managed to persuade his daughter to stop looking for something to eat. She went to the cafe, only when her parents promised her that afterwards they would go back to the beach again and keep looking for Mr. Rabbit. She had to agree. William was making plans. He should probably tell Alice that Mr. Rabbit had gone on a sea voyage and suggest that she visit the local toy store. Maybe she picked something she liked. He's distracted. He was already stressed by this fruitless search. He wanted to swim in the sea, visit local attractions. Did you have to search the neighborhood for Mr. Rabbit? It was unlikely, of course, that the offer to buy a new toy would make Alice so happy. William knew perfectly well how much his daughter loved that rabbit, but something had to be done. Alice once again asked the people she met if they had seen her toy. And suddenly a woman who was leading two kids in white costumes by the hand answered in the affirmative. "And so this is your missing one." Radiantly, she smiled at Alice. "Have you seen my rabbit?" Woke up the girl, but not the rabbit and its photo, where the woman smiled and looked at Alice's parents. "Go over there. There's a lamppost around the corner. There's a very interesting ad on it." Alice, ahead of the adults, rushed to that very post. When Kelly and William arrived, the girl was already reading the notice. It was printed on a black and white printer. A picture of Mr. Rabbit took up most of the sheet. It was definitely him. Except for some reason his hat was adorned with paper flowers. Those details hadn't been there before. The text was, of course, speculative. "I got lost on the seafront when I went out alone to admire the sea. Such a rash act. I should have lost sight of my little mistress. Now I miss her. I miss her very much, and I'm waiting for them to find me and take me away. I'm staying with a nice man for now. Here's his phone number. Contact him. I'm very, very much looking forward to it." Sure enough, William immediately called back the number given. A voice that appeared to belong to an elderly man answered him. They arranged to meet right away on the boat, on the dock. This man worked there, coordinating flights, taking fares. "Hello, it's warm." The tanned old man smiled at them. And then he turned to Alice alone. "So this is your rabbit?" "My," fervently assured the girl. "I can see in your eyes that you are telling the truth, but there was a red-haired girl before you." She claimed that the toy of her up to the floor with her feet demanded to return her beast. "And you gave it back?" Alice gasped. Her lips trembled immediately, a sure sign of sustained tears. William's heart squeezed with acute pity for her daughter. How could he help her? No. The old man shook his head. "I asked her one question right away, and the girl couldn't answer it. And if the rabbit was hers, it wouldn't have been hard for her. Now I'll ask you one." Alice exhaled with relief and looked carefully at the older man. He just like that radiated calmness and infected those around him. There are such people stretched navy sweatshirt and without a visor dashingly shifted on the bowl. In general, they made him some kind of almost fairy tale character. "You well looked at the photo on the ad," clarified the old man. "Yes," nodded the girl. "Then answer me, what has changed? What is wrong with your toy?" Maybe something has been added or, conversely, disappeared. Well, answer the flowers on the hats, smiled the girl. They were not there before, right? The old man shone. I twisted them specially from paper and pinned them to the hat. To test such a thing, there are a lot of people who want to get such a beautiful toy. I need to know for sure. Boat Ka went to his booth and soon returned with Mr. Rabbit in his hands. Alice immediately clutched the toy tightly to her. William did not hesitate. Never again would his daughter lose her plush friend. After all she had been through. William talked to the old man for a while afterward, offering him money for the find, but of course he wouldn't take it. The archer told him that he had a granddaughter. Now she is almost an adult, but before that she used to come to her grandfather's house for vacations. Sea, sun, lots of friends, magnificent nature. What else does a child need for happiness? The old man is a girl on a boat. They went to the beach, climbed mountains, went to the city, to the amusement park and water park. It was a fun time. But then my Alice grew up, went to university. She had her own business, her own worries for young people, in a word. Now she doesn't visit much. I miss her, of course. When Alice was little, she used to carry a toy with her everywhere. But not a stuffed animal, but a doll. I just imagined what would have happened to my granddaughter if that doll had gotten lost back then. The old man grinned. A tragedy of universal scale, no less. And then I see a rabbit on the bench, forgotten and lying. And it's dark, it's late. You can see it's a favorite toy. You can see it right away. Obviously, the child is very upset. So he took it to his box. I don't know what will happen to him at night. There are young people walking around and stray dogs running around. It's safer in my place, under my supervision. And in the morning, next to the place where he found the ad, I pasted the same one. And also on the embankment walked somewhere where such leaves hung. It worked. Here you go. Thank you very much. William shook the old man's hand firmly. That rabbit really means a lot to our daughter. Just one more question. How did you know the owner of the toy was a girl? That's what you said in the ad, lost her little mistress. It's not a doll. It's simple. Boys play different games. Their toys tend to be a little more scruffy and tattered. I saw a flower on the rabbit's shirt. Somebody made it with their own inexperienced hands. Well, of course, only a girl could do that. It's not like a boy would embroider a cross-stitch. Did I do it? Kelly smiled. Many years ago, our daughter inherited the toy. Did I get it right away? He's a complicated rabbit with a history. Of course, Alice never left her stuffed animal anywhere else. The girl even carried it to school in her backpack as a kind of talisman. And already not a little then was almost 12 years old. And yet the rabbit was in her satchel. The fateful day Alice didn't come home. Interested in something. William was approached by a boy who was selling toys on a makeshift counter. A skinny, tanned teenager about 13, 14 years old. Rustic, he seemed to be dressed very plainly, if not poorly. Shorts, stretchy line, scarlet t-shirt, flip-flops. Yeah, and the accent is a little unusual. It's a beautiful toy. William pointed his eyes at Mr. Rabbit. The longer the man looked at the stuffed animal, the clearer he realized that he was Mr. Rabbit. It would still be possible to assume that the toy is just a copy of the very same plush friend on the flower that Kelly came out years ago on his shirt. There it was. William has now gotten a very clear look at it, and it's just amazing. It's the thread that could lead to Alice. 5 years of searching had left the man desperate to find his daughter. And now this. It's a beautiful toy, the teenager agreed. Whose is it? My sister's sister grew up, and now we're selling her possessions. William had a whole 1 million more questions. His heart was pounding, dark spots flashed in his eyes, but you have to look calm and poised. The guy must not realize what impression the toy had made on William. This will cause unnecessary suspicion. Might frighten the boy and then possibly cut short. It's as thin as a spider's web. Can I buy this rabbit? William clarified. For my daughter, she'd love it. Yes, of course. The young salesman shrugged his shoulders and set a high price, I must say. But William wasn't even going to haggle. And now Mr. Rabbit was back in his hands. I can't believe it. Too bad the toy can't talk. I'd like to ask Mr. Rabbit about Alice. Where did she go 5 years ago? What's wrong with her now? Though that last question would be a scary one to ask. There's no telling what might have happened to her daughter. Uncertainty is, of course, hard and scary, but nothing is known yet. What is known is that hope lives on. Hope that the girl is all right, that she will be found someday, right? William took the toy and walked towards the exit of the market. There was no way the boy would suspect anything, but William wouldn't leave. Of course, he won't go anywhere now. He'll take a secluded place and watch the boy from there. Someday the boy will go home, and William will follow him like a shadow. He needs to find out where this teenager lives. That's where Alice might be. The boy said the rabbit belonged to his sister. Maybe it is Alice. Mr. Rabbit was her toy. Call the police. The thought visited William several times during the waiting process. But the man never made the call. Too soon, too soon. There was nothing they could do to help him now. How many times had this happened in 5 years? Especially at first, it was a passerby who was relentlessly questioned with no clothes on. The father would suddenly say he'd seen a similar girl here and there. William called the police, demanded they follow up on the lead. They did, but it always turned out to be some other kid, a familiar face in a stranger's car. So William calls the police again. They set up a cordon, checked the cars, and again in vain. And so many, many times. As time went on, the police became less and less responsive to such signals. And then the search turned into something sluggish, formal, for the sake of a tick. It was unbearable. Of course, now they'd tell him the toy was wrong. They just don't seem to know Mr. Rabbit's history. They don't realize that William can't be wrong. No, better to check it out for himself and then go to the police with more reliable and complete information. William sat down on the bench for a cool bun. Great vantage point. There's that kid right there, right in the palm of his hand. The man just happened to be in this small country town. Actually, the nuts had to go on company business to his colleague, but he suddenly fell ill. Here and sent William with work matters. The man sorted out unexpectedly, quickly, and without problems. There was still enough time left before departure. That's why William decided to take a walk in a foreign city. In the past, he always liked to wander around new places to get acquainted with the local color. After his daughter's disappearance, the feeling had dulled. Has it faded? Not surprisingly. And yet William felt the urge to go for a walk on a sunny September day. The streets are quite deserted. It's typical of such small towns. It's probably more crowded in the evenings and weekends. And now there are elderly people on benches, young moms with strollers. That's the whole population. Who's at work, who's at school. And the city is quiet like this. William walked through the streets and wondered. It felt as if his time machine had transported everything back a couple of decades. As if from the past, old houses, dusty sidewalks with grass, overgrown squares. And here it would be really back 10 years. They were so happy then, so inexpressibly happy, the three of them, he, Kelly, Alice. It seemed that it would always be like that and even better, but the fates, as usual, had their own plans for everything, including their family. After that memorable trip to the sea, in which Mr. Rabbit was lost and then miraculously found, Kelly became ill, a common, seemingly common cold, but it lingered for far too long. Symptoms in the form of weakness, dizziness, and poverty did not leave the young woman. She didn't even want to go to the doctors at first. Don't be ridiculous. Kelly fought off her husband, who insisted she go to the hospital. I don't have a high fever. Well, I'm not strong enough. Well, the headache, it will go away for a little while. That's the kind of thing doctors don't worry about. It didn't. Energetic young woman who had time to do a lot of things during the day, and then in the evening and go for a walk. The whole family was suddenly pulled completely and cheerful. In the morning, she could hardly get out of bed to go to work. Back Kelly now returned exclusively by cab, although before she loved to walk and always walked home. Household chores, daughter household. All this was now on William. He didn't complain. It was not difficult for him to prepare dinner and check Alice's homework. But he was frightened by Kelly's condition, who still insisted that she was doing well and that she would soon be better. One day, the man could not stand it and almost forcefully pushed his straight spouse into the car and drove her to the best center in the city. Not free, of course. But the doctors from there could definitely be trusted. The diagnosis sounded like a thunderclap, some rare blood disease, genetic dormant for the time being, and then suddenly woke up and activated treatment. Practically none, only experimental and very expensive. Prognosis. The prognosis is very unfavorable. For the young spouses, it became a huge ordeal. Both felt confused and frightened. Kelly cried and talked incessantly about wanting to see her daughter grow up. William's heart was tearing with pity for his wife and himself, too. How would he be without her, if anything? The man had never felt for anyone like he felt for Kelly. They were like two halves of the same whole. William had never known such a thing was possible. He thought love stories were the stuff of poets. Then he met Kelly and realized he was wrong. They were happy, so happy together. A model family. They were invited, held up as role models. And then this. Alice, of course, they didn't tell us all the details. They only said that Mom was ill, she needed rest, peace, positive emotions. And the treatment, of course, it was necessary to explain to the girl why her mother now so often goes to the hospital, drinks pills by the handful, and goes to the center as to work. At first, the experimental treatment seemed to work. Kelly felt better. Her tests were almost normal. William was relieved at the time. He thought it was over. They'd won. The man breathed a sigh of relief. The family was slowly getting back on track. Yes, Kelly now had to have her blood counts monitored and take medication. Oh, it was nothing. It was nothing compared to what could have happened. Happiness lasted about 6 months. And then the disease took its toll on the young woman with redoubled vigor. Kelly's body was no longer responding to therapy. She was fading right before her eyes. William often remembered his wife as she had been in her last months. Pale, thin, with bruises all over her body. It was unbearable to see your loved one ill and to be unable to help them. William met with doctors, searched for centers that would take such cases, consulted with professors, and everywhere the answer was the same. Nothing can be done. It's a disease. The man invented this flea market only because it reminded him very much of the spontaneous market near his grandmother's house, where he and Kelly lived for the first years of their marriage. There were none of those in their town now. But here in this place, it was like a mini market from the past, where people sold all sorts of things from their pockets. Kelly liked to look at old things at the flea market near her house, and she walked through it like a museum, admiring the leather-bound books, the old-fashioned floor lamp, and the clothing from around the middle of the last century. I mean, this is history. History incarnate, she said to her husband, who didn't particularly share her spouse's interest, but dutifully wandered along with her through the long rows. Surely Kelly wouldn't have missed this hoarder by now. Nor did William pass it by. Decided to take a walk, see what people were selling. I came across this teenager. At first I couldn't believe it when I saw Mr. Rabbit on the counter. But now he's got the toy in his hands, living proof that he wasn't dreaming. Miracles indeed. The sun attracted a September breeze, nice and fresh, and chased the mouse away. Sitting on the bench was even pleasant. William kept his eyes on the boy who sat in the lotus posture in front of his counter and offered goods to passers-by. Only nobody bought anything from him. Of course, who needs old stuffed animals? The only thing that could still attract anyone, Mr. Rabbit, was now in the hands of William. This one really hoped that not too long ago this toy had been held by his daughter. Perhaps the rabbit still held the warmth of her hands. He wanted to believe that. William had last seen his daughter exactly 5 years ago. It was also a September morning. The girl was going to school. The weather was about the same. Sunny, clear, pleasant man was having a hasty breakfast. He was already late for work. Alice was up before everyone else as usual. Since Kelly was gone, she hadn't slept well at all. It had been almost 3 years by then, but the problems hadn't gone away. Although William regularly showed the girl to the neurologist and dutifully fed her all the prescribed medications, Alice sat at the table and melancholically embroidered with a teaspoon sugar in a glass of tea. In front of her on a plate lay a sandwich with sausage, cheese, and herbs. It had been made for the girl by Jenna. She had left home very early today. She had to have another test at the women's clinic, and they take blood early. So she left, out of the blue. Soon their family will have a baby boy. The boy William will become a father for the second time, and Alice will become a big sister. She had longed so much for a brother or sister. A few years ago, she had asked for a baby boy from Mom and Dad, and they promised that it would still be there, but later. And so Alice's wish was about to come true. Just brother and parents, Mom, stepmom, and Alice. Now she already and obviously does not want to become an older sister. Except that no one was interested in her opinion on this matter. Jenna, she's very good, kind, sensitive. She tries to become Alice, if not a mother, at least a good friend. She watches special videos, how to weave beautiful braids, buying up for her adopted daughter beautiful nooks, toys, clothes. Only Alice is indifferent to all this. She's changed a lot since not being Kelly, but that's not surprising. All three of them were so close. A real team, they understood each other without words. Laughing a lot, always coming up with something interesting. And then tragedy struck. Her mother was Alice's favorite and dearest person. With Kelly gone, the girl's whole world turned upside down. William knew it would be hard. He himself could hardly bear the grief that had fallen on her. But Alice withdrew into herself. She stopped eating, stopped drinking. There was no talk of going to school for a long time. The girl as if frozen in a cocoon, and no way to get through to her. Gradually, with the help of doctors, William managed to at least a little disintegrate. Daughter Alice at least stopped refusing food. But she remained indifferent and cold. It was as if something in her was torn. The cheerful girl had changed. William hoped not irrevocably. Her father tried to please her on a trip the two of them went, and often went somewhere cafes, entertainment, children's centers, stores. Nothing helped. Everything that had delighted my daughter before now left her completely indifferent. It was hard, and it was scary. The only thing that remained unchanged was Alice's attachment to Mr. Rabbit. The girl seemed to grow to love and appreciate the toy even more. Her daughter grew older, and Mr. Rabbit traveled in her school bag, accompanying her mistress everywhere. William did not think during that difficult period that another woman would appear in his life, and certainly not that it would happen so soon. But it happened. All the same friends, seeing that their buddies are in a depressed state, one day dragged him literally forcefully out of the house. They were sitting in a bar, drinking, laughing, discussing something insignificant, just like in the old days. And William really relaxed, took a little break from his thoughts and his problems. And then the company was joined by the ladies' wives of these friends. One of them came with her friend Jenna. As it later turned out, it was a planned event. The friends decided to introduce William to someone so that he would not go completely mad, struggling in his thoughts and anxieties. They rightly believed that Alice would also benefit from a woman's attention and care. Jenna. She was aware of William's situation and was ready to dive into it all. Should feelings for the man arise? Of course, Jenna herself had a difficult fate, a failed marriage under her belt, the husband much older and wealthier than Jenna herself. He behaved towards her like a possessive man. During the years of marriage, the woman completely lost her self-esteem, but acquired a lot of complexes. She couldn't leave her husband. Somehow he suppressed her will, subjugated himself, made her believe that she accepts him. No one needs her. So worthless and wretched. Jenna fulfilled all the desires and demands of her husband, except one. She could not give him an heir. Examined on this occasion, found health problems. Jenna was told that with such features of the body, she will never be able to get pregnant. For a woman, it became a tragedy. After all, from childhood, she dreamed of being a mother of many children. The husband demanded a divorce. He called Jenna the last words, accused her of infertility, as if she could do something about it. And so Jenna was left alone. Over time, the woman realized that this divorce was a huge blessing for her. Now she didn't understand how she'd ever lived with such a man. For a while, Jenna did not think about a new relationship. Healed wounds came to her senses, and then Then she wanted to meet her mankind. Understanding sensitive such a person who would agree to a marriage without children. It's a difficult task. I can't tell you that. Her friends told her about William and Jenna, and suddenly she wanted to meet him. Especially a man who's raising a daughter on his own. He already had a child, and the possibility of having more children would hardly be a problem for such a man. She liked William at first sight. Handsome, pleasant to talk to. Sensitive, kind. Not at all like Jenna's old husband. A man like that is very easy and warm to be around. And then he needs so much support and care right now. And so does his little girl. And Jenna has so much unspent love and tenderness. And so it began. They began to meet, then suddenly for themselves realized that they no longer want to part. William's feelings for Jenna. It wasn't like Kelly, from the first wife. The man was dizzy, goosebumps, passion, tenderness, vivid emotions. Jenna she attracted with her reliability, warmth, gentleness. With her William felt a calmness that he had not felt for a long time. Jenna was like a quiet home harbor, a shelter, a rear. It attracted, did not let go. It was not without its difficulties, of course. How to tell Olsa that there would be another woman in their house so soon? How to build a relationship between stepmother and stepdaughter? William assumed that the daughter would be against it. But Alice accepted the change, as she had for the last couple of years, with complete indifference. Jenna tried very hard to make friends with the girl, tried to talk to her, to anticipate her every wish. She was always thinking up interesting trips. All past Alice, and occasionally could still talk to her father. But her stepmother just didn't notice her girl. Jenna was very upset by this. It was the first time she had seen such an indifferent child. The woman understood that Alice was very traumatized by the loss of her mother. But this is not normal. This behavior, we have to do something. Children's psychologists spread their hands, saying that the girl needs time, love, attention, sympathy, respect. All this will definitely bear fruit. And then something happened that no one expected. Jenna realized that she was expecting a child. The doctors had convinced her that such an outcome was impossible. And yet the miracle happened. Jenna had never felt so happy. She was going to be a mom after all. Perhaps the arrival of a baby will melt the ice in Alice's heart. Little babies are like a ray of light. William didn't know how to react to the news. He seemed to be happy, but he was also anxious, mostly because of Alice. Unlike Jenna, the man realized that it was unlikely that his daughter would be happy about the new member of the family, especially since everything was happening so quickly. Alice Ann longed, as if in an icy shell for whom she longs for her mother misses her old life. And then everything changes so fast. First Kelly's gone, then Jenna shows up. Now there's a baby on the way. Alice has slipped in her grades, used to bring home only A's and occasional B's. Now her diary was filled with 2s and 3s. Teachers at first felt sorry for the girl, glad that she at least returned to class. Well, not to pull her grades until graduation from school. And Alice also lost all her friends. How to be friends with a man who refuses to go out and does not answer the phone. So the girl was left alone, which it seems, did not regret. This new Alice. Closed indifferent, frightening and disturbing. William loved his daughter very much. She was the meaning of his life. He was angry at himself, at the doctors, at the circumstances. Angry because he was powerless to change anything. To bring joy back to his daughter's life, to help her. William, blame yourself. Maybe you should have waited to get married. You see, he couldn't bear the hardships of life alone. He wanted warmth, love, and acceptance. Suddenly, the arrival of Jenna, and now the baby, had traumatized Alice further. She's good. Jenna is warm, so sincere, easy, and pleasant to be with. Except that Alice, when she found out that there would soon be a baby in the family, Jenna looked at her father with such eyes, as if he had betrayed her. Then William more than once remembered that full of pain and despair. The look in his daughter's eyes, Alice dreamed of him in terrible dreams. The man would jump up and could not sleep for a long time. Of course, in what happened to Alice, William blamed himself, did not save what he had done wrong. That's how worthless a father he turned out to be. Kelly wouldn't have let that happen. Everything was kind of normal that morning. Nothing alerted William. Alice put Mr. Rabbit in her backpack. From the hour end of the ponytail, she pulled up her white loafers. It was still quite warm. Alice then stepped out of the house in a white short-sleeved blouse with lanterns, a bouffant skirt like a princess in a dark blue color, and polish in their boat shoes, all lovingly picked out by Jenna. She tried very hard to find clothes in which Alice would look like a doll. And she succeeded, it must be said, only the student herself. The outfits did not please her too much. William remembered very well what Alice had left in that morning, because in the evening he described in detail his daughter's costume to the policemen who were writing the report. Alice didn't come back from school. She just didn't come back and didn't show up the next day. And another day later, also the girl was missing. Since then, William did not see her again and knew nothing about her fate. Jenna was already on maternity leave, so she did not go to work. She met Alice from school and a delicious lunch, specially cooked different dishes for the girl to finally understand what she liked the most. It was Jenna who called William when the girl did not return from school at the usual time. Her voice sounded worried. But William wasn't worried then. So Alice was half an hour late. Maybe she'd finally gone out with her girlfriends, or just hanging out at the store. Although, of course, it was nothing like the Alice of today. That's how the old daughter would have behaved. Fun, curious, and cheerful. An hour passed. Jenna dialed William again. This time she sounded panicked. The woman managed to call all Alice's teacher, parents of her classmates. All in one voice assured that the girl left the gymnasium on time. Many saw her leaving the schoolyard, and then Alice's traces were lost. Here already, and William got worried now to send off the boss, and I will come. He threw to his wife. All right, come on, hurry up, I'm so scared. I'll go to the yards myself, look for her. I don't know if she's playing around. Maybe it's somewhere. It just doesn't look like Alice. William was in agreement with his wife. Alice was playing around. No, it can't be fear. An icy hand was already beginning to squeeze his father's heart. By some special instinct, he felt that something had happened, something very bad. Alice was not at home. William had hoped so. The girl's phone, of course, was not answered. Together with the couple, William's neighbors scoured the neighborhood looking for their daughter. The sun was beginning to slip toward the horizon, coloring the sky, fantastic red and pink colors. That's when the man realized it was time to go to the police. Doing so was scary, as if to admit definitively and irrevocably that something terrible and irreparable had happened. But there was no escape. William's statement was not taken seriously at first. A girl almost 12 years old walking around somewhere. Teenagers, that's what they are. Every day parents contact us, and then they find a missing person and get it in the neck from their loving relatives. Yeah, kids do get gray hairs. I can't tell you that. Alice is different. She has no friends now. She doesn't like to go out. She's withdrawn, not sociable. Is she sick? The man in the uniform became suspicious. William felt like punching him in the face for suggesting such a thing. I held back, of course. All the more reason not to be so far from the truth. Of course, Alice is not entirely healthy. Her state of mind is troubling, but it's temporary. It's a bereavement. She'll get better just as long as she finds her daughter. The application's been accepted. The search has begun. The authorities were joined by volunteer teams. The city and its environs were calmed up and down. Posters were put up. Passers-by were questioned. Forest parks and local bodies of water were checked. William himself wandered the streets and climbed into attics, searched basements, peeked over fences in the private sector. Well, he couldn't sit still and wait for the weather to clear while it was unknown what was happening to his daughter. Not knowing. That was the worst part. All kinds of thoughts went through the man's head. It was hard, very hard. William couldn't get his head around it. Jenna also looked lost and frightened. She wandered around the rooms, but she couldn't sit still for a minute. Both of them had not slept for several days, while they were actively searching for results. These searches kept failing. At one time, the police even suspected the parents of the girl, say William or Jenna, did something to Alice, and specifically asked for help so that no one thought of them. But the alibis of both spouses were ironclad. Soon they were cleared of all suspicion. Only Alice was never found. So that didn't make it any easier. Because of the worry, Jenna went into labor prematurely. Tim was born very small and weak. He spent a few days in the neonatal intensive care unit. William. The event that should have been such a joyous occasion left him completely indifferent, scary to say the least. But he did not even worry about the fate of his son while the baby was fighting for his tiny life in the intensive care unit. A child William had not yet known, had not yet had time to love. Without her, the man felt as if half of his heart had been ripped out of his chest. Then, of course, William accepted his son and loved him with all his soul. Looking at this tiny, touching creature of a man, I don't know how I could ever have been so indifferent to him. Now he's a little light in the window for both parents. Funny, so kind, so smart. He already knows that he has an older sister and, unlike adults, is in full confidence that someday she will come back and take him to the park for a walk. Evenings. Announcer glanced at the clock. It was almost 6 o'clock. The plan was to visit more of the local botanical garden. Nuts had been told in one voice that visitors to the city were amazed by this attraction. What garden now? Fox glimmered hope that some information about it would soon surface. That's what was so frightening about it. The kid was selling old toys, starting to pack up. William watched from afar as the place was quickly stocked, unsold, and merchandise. In a large branded supermarket bag, the teenager walked out of the mini-market gate and headed toward the bus stop. William, keeping his distance, followed him. I wanted to stop the boy, shaken by the shoulders, demand an explanation. He must know what had happened to Alice. Except you can't do that. You can't do that. No way to cloud reason, no way to cloud emotion. William understood the need to proceed with the utmost caution. The slightest mistake could scare off the people holding Alice. William was sure that his daughter had been taken years ago and kept locked up alive, and well, all this time. All he needed to do was find her and set her free. The teenager did indeed come to a stop. William stood farther behind a newspaper stand as a bus approached. The boy slid through the open door. William, there was a lot of people on the bus behind him, so it wasn't hard to get lost in the crowd. The bus looped through the city streets at first, then suddenly turned onto a country highway. By that time, there were not so many passengers inside. But the boy, fortunately, sat with his back to his pursuer and, of course, did not notice the surveillance. People were getting off at the stops. It looked like a suburban neighborhood, stretched for kilometers. Private sectors, apartment blocks, vegetable gardens. Everything was gray, dreary, and hopeless. The boy was in no hurry to get out, even when only the two of them were left in the cabin. Finally, the boy jumped up and went to the front door. He glanced indifferently around the parlor, briefly fixing his attention on William. Surprised. Maybe a little at the fact that someone else was still on the bus. Usually he seemed to be the only one getting off at this stop. I guess the kid didn't recognize his customer or didn't seem to. William, so as not to make the teenager even more suspicious, didn't follow him. He drove literally 100 meters ahead, and then as if he realized, he asked the driver to stop. The man rushed back, holding on to the birch trees growing in a wall along the road. He was afraid that he had lost sight of the boy, that now he had long gone somewhere far away. But no, William was lucky. The teenager was standing right where the driver had dropped him off. This place, it wasn't even a bus stop. No benches, no shelter, just a pole with a name tag pierced through it. What was this village or the name of the neighborhood? The teenager hesitated because he had something wrong with one of his flip-flops. Like something sharp was stuck in it, and the boy was trying to get it out. Finally, he got it out and went on his way. William, of course, followed him relentlessly, always hiding behind some sort of cover. The terrain here was, of course, quite something, wanting no houses, barracks, or vegetable gardens. Only an overgrown wasteland scattered along it clusters of old poplars, 3 or 4 in number. At least there was a grove of birch trees along the vacant lot. William wandered along it, keeping his eyes on the boy. He was far enough away, about 50 meters, so they walked along parallel paths. Weird. It was as if the boy was from the past. It's not the modern way they look at it. Teenagers today have a very different look. Especially boys, they have a cocky, confident look. They think they're smarter than everyone else, but this one's a scaredy cat. You could see he didn't really want to go back to where he was going. Maybe he was looking forward to the reprisal for selling just one toy. For some reason, William felt sorry for the absurdly outgoing teenager. Finally, the boy reached the tall, blank fence that enclosed a fairly large area. The tin sheets were painted with green paint in some places. The fence rose high. There was not even a small slit in it, through which it would be possible to look inside. And you couldn't climb it without being seen. An impenetrable fortress. That's what it was. The kid walked up to the wicket, pressed the bell. After a while, the massive door creaked open. The teenagers were allowed into the territory, and then the door slammed shut. That was it. William watched the strange place from the woods. What the hell is this place? It's like a remote farmhouse with not a soul for miles around. It looks kind of ominous and suspicious. Who knows who lives there? Maybe ask around the nearest neighborhood. I'm sure the locals know. You're not exactly keeping a low profile. That's for sure. Call head-on asking the owners who they are and where their kid got his missing daughter's toy is also such a good idea. Did William's gut tell him it could be the intruders? They'd either eliminate William themselves or they'd smuggle Alice out, so no one will ever find her again. Does Alice really live in this dark place? Is she really so close behind that green fence? William struggled hard to fight the curb of all his emotions. It was important for him to remain master of the situation, to keep his feelings in check. Otherwise, it's easy to mess things up. Gradually, William's plan to ask people about this strange farm has matured. And then, perhaps, set up a lookout point right in this rush to get an excuse from the boss. But the man can't leave here now. Maybe Alice is close by. What if she needs help? At these thoughts, the man was beginning to get a large shiver. Interviews with the locals clarified the situation a little. William walked to the bus stop located a few kilometers away from Berezovka. It was a residential private sector, ordinary village houses and two-story apartment buildings. Children walking along the streets on bicycles, scraps of conversations coming from the fences, old men talking about something at the store. It was to these old men that William went with his questions about who was who, and they certainly must be in the know. It turned out that in Berezovka, behind the green fence, is a kind of private farm. The owner there is strange, unsociable, but honestly always offers first-class goods. And they don't jack up the prices. Cow goat milk, eggs, sometimes pork or beef, seasonal vegetables and fruits from the vegetable garden. And also dairy products, cheese, cottage cheese, sour cream. The locals claimed that people usually queue up in advance for the unloved Peter's goods. Everything is so tasty, one of the old men explained. He himself, Peter Strange, of course, added his words willingly left comrade. How many times we called him to sit down, talk about life, get better acquainted. He refuses. He keeps referring to important matters. Do they have children? You don't know? How could I not know? Yes, we do. His sons are grown up now. They're all teenagers. Only these boys don't socialize with our locals and never have. Like their father's a quiet, unsociable man. We don't see them much if we meet them suddenly. I don't think we'd recognize them. What about the school? William wondered. Children have to go to school. They're homeschooled, like Peter and his wife teach them themselves. And then the boys take exams separately from everyone else. And then they go on to the next grade. Our local kids say that the teacher sets these guys as an example for them, saying that they study well, diligently. Not like them local kids. William, after talking to the old people, got a bit downhearted. He was clearly told that his favorite farmer has only boys, sons growing up. No one's ever heard of the girl. On the other hand, the teenager had said that the stuffed rabbit had once belonged to his sister. William's heart suddenly clenched with horror. Maybe the kid meant that his sister didn't have one anymore. No, the boy had mentioned that his sister had grown up and didn't eat a stuffed friend. There was a conversation, that's for sure. That same evening, William settled all the formalities, arranged with his boss for an unscheduled vacation, warned his wife. Jenna immediately realized that something had happened. She didn't believe the theory of a protracted business trip, so William told her everything. "We should go to the police," the wife exclaimed. "Mr. Rabbit is a powerful lead. What about you? It's not safe for you to go there yourself. Don't go in there alone anymore. You hear me? Everything's under control." William reassured her. "Of course, I'll go to the police. I just need to find out as much as I can about this strange family, about this farm. You remember how they've been treating my reports lately, don't you? They even stopped checking them. I need something more convincing than a stuffed rabbit." "I will. Just please be careful. How would you like to believe you really found Alice?" And so the days of surveillance dragged on. William would come in the early hours of the morning. He would take up his retail observation post and wait for the sounds of goats, cows mooing, chickens. Sometimes the peaceful hum of human voices. William listened, hoping to hear his daughter, but what came to his ears was mostly the confident and commanding voice of the master dispensing orders. The others were barely audible. It was impossible to make out who was speaking teenager, woman, girl. Everyone here seemed to have their own responsibilities. The same kid William met at the flea market. He headed to town every morning. He carried sacks filled with goods. Apparently, it was junk that the family preferred to get rid of for a small profit. Another boy, who looked to be the same age as the eternal salesman, drove a herd of tacks in the morning. William counted 7 slashes of 4 cows. That's a decent-sized farm. The owner himself left the house every day. The man seemed younger than William, but his thick beard and modern clothes gave him the appearance of an old man, or rather an old man. A plaid shirt for his excitement, wide pants, stomped and flip-flops on his feet. That one was still seen. This man drove a rusty truck, apparently driving his produce around the neighborhood and doing some shopping for the family. No one else left the house, but there were other people there. There were. As the men and teenagers went about their business, voices could be heard over the green fence. There was a life going on, and a very active one, by the looks of it. Someone was working in the vegetable garden, cooking dinner, fixing something. What a strange family it was, wasn't it? In all the time that William had spent at his observation post, no one had ever come to visit them, or even for milk or eggs. Total isolation. It's been 2 weeks. William had already learned the family's daily routine. Each day was exactly the same as the last. No changes, no news, teenagers, boys. And the one selling things at the flea market, the young shepherd boy. Both of them looked haggard and indifferent. Sometimes they'd meet at the gate, on their way home, and there was none of the usual and normal brotherly bickering between them. These kids didn't pick on each other, didn't laugh together, didn't joke like other teenagers, just said hello and waited for the door to be opened. They stood quietly and silently, as if they were not 13 or 14 years old, but much older. They were old men. Maybe the boys aren't well, or someone has trained them in such a way that they are afraid to say a word to each other. Several times the man stopped himself from doing anything rash. He wanted to jump up to the owner of this house and ask him directly about Alice, if he was going to be sneaky and deny it. Beat him up. In any case, this farmer is an extremely unpleasant person. But this was not to be done under any circumstances. William would get nowhere and would only get himself into trouble. In the end, William decided that there was no point in waiting any longer. He wouldn't learn anything new about this family. It was time to take action. Time to go to the police. He was put in touch with the investigator, who had the Alice case in his desk for so many years. And the man told him about everything and the mystery of the rabbits, which is definitely a toy Alice rare toy, and even embroidered on the shirt flower. Accidentally got very many years ago in the hands of the girl. A family heirloom, you might say. William also told me about the strange farmhouse. He had to lie to make it convincing. The man added from himself that he'd seen bruises on the teenager, though that wasn't true. And he said he'd heard a woman screaming behind the fence as if she were being beaten. William hoped that these details would give the police more reason to be proactive than idle suspicion. Something very strange is going on that is incomprehensible. And Alice, she's probably there, I can feel it holding her back. The investigator, he dryly informed that he had accepted the information and that William would be informed when the check was made. The man continued his surveillance of the house. The cats were scratching at his soul. It seemed to him that the investigator did not take his call seriously. But the next day, 2 men in uniform knocked on the green gate. One of the guests was the very same investigator. William froze in anticipation at his observation post. He had not expected such a quick reaction. It seemed to him that he had been brushed aside like a pesky fly. But they hadn't come to check on him. As promised, the door was not opened to the representatives of the authorities immediately. They spent about 15 minutes waiting. All this time, they periodically pressed the bell button and insistently knocked on the door. It was simply impossible not to hear this. Finally, the door opened. There was a short dialogue. The policeman showed their ID to someone and they were let inside. There were long minutes of waiting. It must have been about half an hour when the uniformed men finally came out into the street. They headed for the squad car. William rushed toward them. "What's going on?" "Oh, you're here?" The investigator was surprised. "What can I say? It's a big farm. People work hard. Everything is made by their own hands, furniture and buildings of all kinds. My sons work hard, not like their peers who have never held a hammer at that age. It's like they're all homeschooled kids. They have everything they need to live. Yeah, this family's been checked regularly by child welfare. The 3 sons are not sons. They were taken from the orphanage, so the family is watched. And there are no girls in this house," the second policeman added. "Only boys. And that's it." William asked disappointedly. "That's it. You won't check them anymore." "In fact, it's an investigative secret. But I'll tell you as a father, we're on the verge of checking them again. Something's come to our attention." The investigator had known William for years and had a human connection to him. He himself had a daughter the same age as Alice. So the man understood the unhappy father's feelings and wanted to reassure him. "It's about Alice. It's not clear yet. I can't talk too much either. As soon as everything becomes known, I will immediately tell you. And another thing, we'll take you to the city now. You better not be here anymore because you don't know what's going on. They'll see you, and that could spoil everything." William, nodding his head in agreement, went back to the local hotel where he had rented a room all this time. He tried to distract himself, wondering if he should even go home. But then he banished that thought. No, here he is closer to Alice, probably. From the cops. William didn't get any more information. When would they come to check again? What had aroused their suspicion? When do we expect news? Not knowing is exhausting both mentally and physically. William felt as if he were back in the time when his daughter had just disappeared. Tagda on name August, spat, dumat o chem to drugum, krom isheznovania Alisa, risavolvi golov versi odnu strashni drugoi. Something similar was happening now. The scary thing was that it might be revealed soon, right? And it could turn out to be very scary, no less terrifying than the other version. The cops never find out anything. And that Teddy Bunny trail, it'll turn out to be false. I don't know where these people found the toy. Maybe they found it in a dumpster years ago when Alice was first taken. The person who did this could very well have gotten rid of the stuff while they were waiting. It's been 4 days. William spent all that time in the hotel. He had promised the policeman not to make any mistakes around that green fence, hadn't he? This could ruin everything. And suddenly, there's a call. A call from an investigator asking William to come down to the station for a meeting. Did you find her? You'll find out officially on the spot. I need your cooperation. William, I don't remember how I got to my hometown. I think I caught a hitchhiker on the highway because I had to wait until evening for a bus. But William couldn't wait for that. He certainly couldn't. And finally, William is in the investigator's office. He looks at him carefully and sternly. That look had a sobering effect on William. The man pulled himself together, set himself up for a serious conversation. Well, the investigator said, The place turned out to be very strange indeed. Even on our first visit there, a colleague noticed something suspicious, although at first glance everything was just fine. The young policeman, the investigator's partner, of course, immediately realized that only sons lived in the family. This was confirmed by the mother of the family, a complete quiet woman, so modest and fearful that they did not even dare to look the policeman directly in the eyes. But in the course of the inspection, the guy noticed something that alerted him. On a rope in the garden among the shirt pants, Shorts dried several dresses, and those dresses certainly didn't fit the lady of the house. They obviously belonged to someone more delicate. But who? If there are only boys in the house? The cops quietly reported their observation to the investigator, and they continued the search with most of it, so as not to arouse suspicion and the landlady who followed them. The men assured her that it was all a mere formality. It was just a signal from the neighbors. They heard some shouting from the fence. Meanwhile, they carefully examined the house, trying to find traces of the missing girl, combs, and mirrors. Women's shoes, some other female things seen in the house. All of these could have belonged to the mother of the family, but not those. Several dresses stuffed him and ropes. The policeman looked in the basement and attic, checked every outbuildings. The girl was nowhere to be found, nor was there any sign of her presence. But passing by the carpet hanging on the wall in the living room, the investigator caught a sound, as if someone had tripped somewhere behind the wall. Only who? All the boys were outside, and they were gardening. The landlady followed them like a shadow. Where did that sound come from? The investigator stopped, listened. But behind the wall, it was quiet now. There is a room of some kind. The man asked. In a deliberately indifferent tone, he waved toward the carpet. No, it's just that the wall is thick on that side, and the whole house was conceived in winter. So we made the wall denser and strengthened the insulation. My husband's a good man, and my sons are growing up the same way. Did you hear that sound? Asked the investigator to his colleague when they left the strange house. Yeah, it's a secret room, and they're hiding someone. It was hard to get a search warrant with a task force. Too little evidence, too vague suspicions, but the investigator did it. I had to embellish the facts, tweak some documents. But those girls' dresses and the sound behind the wall kept him on his toes. Couldn't a man dismiss that evidence? He just couldn't. The investigator was taking a risk. If nothing had been discovered, he would have been in huge trouble, up to and including criminal liability. But the task force did find the secret room. The guys took the carpet off the wall, and there was a door, so thin, painted in the color of the wall. The secret room contained 2 narrow beds. On one of them, hugging each other, sat 2 very young girls, about 16 or 17 years old. The sight of the policeman made them truly terrified. They screamed and fought back. Both of them were convinced that these men in uniform were trying to harm them. The girls were very afraid of strangers and were hysterical. The owners of the house were detained until the circumstances were clarified. Teenage boys were placed in temporary detention shelters. But the girls were sent to a dispensary, as both clearly needed the help of specialists. Alice was one of these girls, and Alice was amazed at what she had heard. William looked at the investigator and waited for an answer. We believe so, he nodded. Take a look at these photos, you'll recognize them. The first photo showed a dark-haired, frightened girl. Long hair the color of relaxed chocolate. Black eyes, not Alice. But the second picture, William even gasped as he looked at it. It was his daughter. Of course, she had grown up a lot, but not to recognize Alice Williams simply could not. Blonde curls below her shoulders, huge, wide-open blue eyes, a mole on her shoulder. That's her. How do I see her? Great, the investigator glowed. It was visible that he was not to the end. I'm sure it was Alice who found it. About seeing her. No luck with that yet. Specialists are working with the girls. Their psychic girls have been subjected to years of processing. They perceive the world around them as hostile. Boys are easier. At least they've been released into society. They had more will. They suffered less. Although there's a lot of psychology work to be done there too. I'll probably tell you girls everything in order. But later. And I can't wait. Understand, We are still investigating the circumstances of what happened. It's already a high-profile case. Even though I'm making a thriller based on this story, it's the first time I've come across something like this. Alice. Is her life in danger? No, physically, she's perfectly healthy. Mentally, she'll be fine. Teenagers are very flexible. Their adaptability is high, so I want to see my daughter. You'll have to pull yourself together later. Wait a little longer. As soon as we're clear, I'll let you know right away. I promise. Alice, she's not ready for this meeting yet. That's the expert's opinion. You can definitely trust them. We should wait. It's better this way. And the investigator wasn't fooled. He called William 2 days later and invited him to talk to him again. All this time, the man had been worried sick. He now knew where his daughter was, but they wouldn't let him see her. It was assured that it might harm Alice. It was too early for an appointment, so the doctor said. Jenna was worried along with William, but she kept repeating to her spouse that all the worst is over. The main thing is that Alice has been found. She is alive and well. Of course, the girl is in deep stress, but she will be helped by specialists. William, I hoped his wife was right. I wanted to believe her. William and Jenna went to the meeting with the investigator together. Little Tim was left with the neighbors. They were also very worried about Alice's fate and supported her parents as best they could. It's an unusual story, to say the least. Please be calm, warned the investigator. But the main thing is that everything ended well. Alice, as an 11-year-old teenager, was still very worried about her mother's departure. And then her father brought a new wife into the house. This girl perceived as a betrayal, but did not show it. She generally all emotions and thoughts after the death of her mother kept to herself, which is not too useful for children of her age. And then suddenly, the news of Jenna's pregnancy. Alice felt completely unnecessary. Soon there would be a new baby in the family. What was she Alice for then? First, there was no mom, and now the little baby will also take the daddy. The girl felt bad, very bad. Parents saw it, tried to get through to her, but nothing worked. But school security guard James unexpectedly succeeded. Attentive and sensitive men often saw a sad girl sitting alone by the window. Her classmates were having fun, chasing each other, figuring things out. The fox sat on the windowsill and looked into the distance, waiting for the end. Change was thinking, apparently about something of his own. He came to her, once started a conversation about something insignificant. He looked attentive and warm. His words sounded soothing, and so began this strange friendship between the girl and the guard. By the way, James talked to many students, both boys and girls. He understood kids. He had a way with each one. And the man was not above teaching, of course. He went to school for a completely different purpose. Alice didn't notice how she trusted James completely. She was misunderstood at home. Tried to placate gifts, all dragged somewhere. Thermesode Lisa. All she needed was someone to talk to about her mom. Someone who was almost physically painful for her father to talk to. Stepmother did not know Alice's mother at all, and treated her most likely as a rival. School guard, he always listened to Alice carefully. Sometimes to the place inserted some lines, sometimes told about his childhood. It was James who gradually became the closest person to Alice. The man willingly agreed with the girl's arguments that she no longer needed her father and did not try to change her mind like other adults. Of course, he is understandable. He's got a new family, a baby on the way. Are you superfluous there? Alice nodded her head sorrowfully. She knew it herself. The adult only reinforced the girl in her speculation. Thought things were getting worse and worse. The stepmother was annoying. The father in general, and turned on by his betrayal. The little girl, and did not realize that they are experienced manipulators. James deliberately exacerbates the gulf between her and her family, and he becomes the main person for the unhappy girl. James, he had a dream from his youth to become the head of a large community that lives by its own rules, not by the schemes imposed by society. Physical labor, simple food. A minimum of goods, civilization like TV, computer, and similar inventions. He saw himself in sweet dreams at the head of a long table. On both sides there are people, old adults, teenagers. And for all of them, he is the main master, benefactor, and protector. Where did such thoughts come from in the young man's mind? It's hard to say. Once I came across a program about hermits and old believers, got interested in this topic, started reading relevant books, watching thematic movies, and I became interested in the idea. Who was he in this life? The son of a cleaning lady, a poor loser with no education and no future. He wanted the power of a well-fed life, and the guy saw only one way to get it all, to start his own community. Maybe there's a mental illness mixed in with it all. Well, a normal person can't do that. James is being worked on by psychiatrists, among others. We don't have the results of the evaluation yet, so there's no way to know for sure. As soon as James' mother died, he immediately sold her apartment and bought land in a remote corner for nothing. A lot of land, and the work began. For the rest of the money, the man bought building materials with the help of local alkas, ready to work for a bottle, erected a house, then slowly encircled it with a tin fence. But all this took time and money. But James spared no resources for his dream. The man worked as a security guard at a supermarket. After putting up a house, he decided it was time to get a couple. It had to start somewhere, building a community. The chosen one for James was Anna, a quiet, modest girl who worked in the same supermarket as a cleaner. Anna was orphaned at an early age, lived alone in a rented apartment. No education, no ambitions, no hopes for a happy future. Her father was very strict. He beat his daughter for the slightest disobedience. That's how Anna's character developed. Quiet, preparing the guided at the same time economic hand. Just what you need. You couldn't find a better wife. James met Anna. The young people dated for a while. The man shared with her his plans for the community, and Anna was delighted with such ideas. They got married. Anna moved into James' home and began to settle in. The couple had 3 sons, one after the other. Anna no longer worked. She took care of the house, the garden, the kids. James slowly expanded the farm, setting up barns, buying livestock. Learning to be a farmer, it wasn't easy for a city dweller, but James was willing to do a lot for his dream. The community was a long way off. While they were just an ordinary family with many children, they needed workers. The sons had grown up, of course. Now they were working almost as hard as their father. James did not raise them spoiled tender, and scientists from them to make them did not intend. Although the middle one clearly shone with mathematical ability. All the sons were homeschooled, so they wouldn't have to spend much time at school. And James needed more children. Anna could no longer get pregnant. Apparently, giving birth to 3 weather babies had torn something in her body. So the couple decided to take the kids from the orphanage. James reasoned that this was even better. They could take teenagers at once. They would become helpers faster than newborn babies, which still need to be raised. James dreamed of taking a whole team, 4, boys and girls. That would be a great start for the community. But it wasn't that simple. The family didn't qualify financially. The security guard's salary only allowed for 3 kids. So there were 3 new sons in the house, who were only a couple or 3 years younger than the birth children. But that wasn't enough for James, very little. The household had grown. His wife did not have time for herself and the house, and with the animals, and in the vegetable garden. James planned to increase sales of farm produce. You've got to get money from somewhere. Otherwise, one cannot become the head of the community. After conferring with his wife, the man made an important decision. By the way, the meeting was purely formal. Anna always agreed with what her husband suggested. In general, James decided to take someone else's child, preferably a girl, so that she could be a wife's helper. The boys seemed to be enough for now. The man realized that this is risky and dangerous activities, and therefore prepared for it in advance. From the neighbors to hide the appearance of the child was easy. Everyone has long been accustomed to the fact that the family lives secluded and isolated. No one visits them, and from behind a blind fence, it is impossible to see what is happening in the yard. But here periodically visit the guardianship authorities. The children are adopted. Their fate is monitored. And these inspectors may notice something. That's why James built a secret room before he brought a stranger's baby into the house. where he planned to hide the girl when the inspection came. And in general, she will have to live somewhere for this assistant, who will grow up to be a wife to one of James' sons. When everything was ready, James began to look for the victim. It wasn't easy. The child, after all, he must want to leave the family, otherwise it will not work. Especially for this man got a job in a neighboring town school security guard just in the gymnasium where Alice studied. Now several 1,000 children constantly flashed before James' eyes. He saw all the kids from prosperous families, living a happy childhood, and students who clearly had something wrong. It was the unwanted and dysfunctional ones that interested the man in the first place. Of course, Alice quickly came to James' attention. The girl with sadness in her eyes avoided the society of her peers, an excellent candidate for foster daughters. At that time, James had already read a lot of psychological and literature. As a future community leader, he must be able to manipulate people. These skills came in handy in his communication with Alice, to find weaknesses, to press on the painful, to rub into confidence. None of this was difficult. Alice herself agreed to come to live with James in a place where abandoned and unwanted children find shelter. A place where everyone is needed and important. The little girl already considered herself superfluous in the family. James had also skillfully thickened the colors and turned the girl against the front rooms. In general, that morning, getting ready for school, Alice knew for sure that she would not return home in the evening. She was in anticipation of a new life, happy, bright, and interesting. She didn't want to stay in her father's family any longer, thanks in large part to James' efforts. While the police volunteer squad searched for Alice, while her father and stepmother were worried. The girl was learning new skills and getting burned out at James' house. She liked it quiet, peaceful, good here. Animals around: goats, cows, dogs, cats, chickens, and funny little chickens. Anna is always around. Alice is the only one in charge. She's so happy. She is so happy to have a girl in the house. Anna teaches her all the household tricks, how to clean the floors, bake bread, grow flowers. It's so exciting. The boys are great too. They're not like the boys at school. Those fools are different. They're attentive, smart, good. They know so much. They can do so much. Interesting. Except James is a little too strict with his own. Everything has to be on his family's rigid schedule. But that's not a bad thing if you look at it that way. Besides, with his sons, he could afford to be rude and curse, and even hit them, if anything. But James never touched her fox. He spoke to her calmly. He tried to explain everything in a quiet, ingratiating voice. The room, however, seemed to the girls strange, too cramped, without a window. But that's all right. But she had her own separate room. No one came in without knocking, no one prying into her soul. If she wanted to be alone, James worked as a security guard at the school for a while after Alice went missing and didn't quit. It could have aroused suspicion. I wrote a statement only 6 months later when the search for the child had already passed its active phase. Around that time, Alice suddenly asked to go home. She missed her father and Jenna too. She also really wanted to see her brother, who of course had already been born. Alice was fed up with it all. Life on a schedule, hard work. Not having to study was a good thing, of course. The boys had to cram their lessons. They had to take exams every year. Alice has been spared from this duty, which cannot but be happy. Well, the rest in general, the girl wanted to go home at least to visit, just to see their own. Alice told James about her desire. She did not feel like a prisoner and believed that she could leave at any minute. He brainwashed the little girl again, told her about God, that all the people outside the fence were living sinful lives, while they had a righteous atmosphere here. They would all surely go to heaven later, and Alice too. Otherwise, the girl will never meet her mother in heaven, because she won't be able to live right there in the big world, and will have time to make sins. James was not a bad psychologist. He understood that the girl is very longing for her mother and pressed on the wound skillfully, almost masterfully. By the way, his sons and his wife, he also implanted in the consciousness of religious attitudes. It was easier to control them. Alice stayed in the James family. She changed a lot over time. The girl sincerely believed that her father and stepmother were evil, spoiled people. Meeting James and living in his family is the greatest good that ever happened to her. The man literally hypnotizes both Alice and the rest of the household. He seemed to believe what he was saying. The children were growing up. The household grew. The dream of a huge community grew closer. Soon sons would bring wives, there would be children, natives of the community. Soon James, as he had dreamed, would sit at the head of the table as the leader of a large group of people. Later, Kathy came into the family. A girl with a complicated fate was happy to finally find a home. Kathy had been running away from her drinking parents, feeding herself. She got through only one company of homeless people, and then to the other a couple of times got to the shelter, from where she was returned to her parents. They beat the daughter up, and she'd run away again and do it all over again. James spotted Kathy at the train station. He saw his man right away. The girl is broken, confused. She has no idea how to move on. That James knows how to help this teenager. Kathy, like Alice, once liked living behind the green fence. It was peaceful. It was a place where she wasn't bullied and where everything had a purpose. It was simple and clear. The girl, just like Alice, was in search, but she did not want to be found. That's the story, the investigator summarized, leading the frozen Jenna and William with his eyes. This is a nightmare. The woman covered her face with her hands, unable to comprehend what she had just heard. I did him. I snapped his head off. William clenched his fists so that the knuckles shared. Don't do that. He'll be held legally responsible for everything. Alice, the doctors won't let me see my own daughter. William growled. How many years have been lost? All because of this lunatic. It's not just that. Investigator James shook his head. He'd chosen his victim carefully. The circumstances were such that your daughter was the perfect choice. She went after him. Take advantage of the girl's grief, scumbagize her, and further cripple her psyche. I don't know if she'll recover from all this now. Here I have good news for you, smiled the investigator. Yes, the specialists have had a hard time. James did a good job with Alice. Such talent should be put to good use. She didn't even want to see you at first. The world frightened her. No wonder she'd been behind a fence for so many years. Today the doctor said Alice wanted to see you. She asked for it. She's doing much better. You hear that? That's a great sign. Everything's gonna be okay.
Subscribe and click the bell.
Camille had already been living in the orphanage for more than 6 months. The 13-year-old girl kept herself apart all this time. She did not want to come into contact with her peers and classmates. For this, she was nicknamed Bun. Camille was not at all offended by this offensive nickname, as she realized that it was her own fault that now she is called such a girl. When she got to the orphanage, she kept thinking, was it right that she volunteered to live in this institution? After all, Camille told the class teacher about her life, and the teacher sounded the alarm. And all was that Camille had divided her life into 2 parts. Until the age of 11, the girl grew up a happy child. She was cherished by her mom, and Dad tried his best they could to buy fashionable things. In general, the parents wanted their daughter to not need anything. And then something happened, and everything went wrong. Initially, the parents between themselves began to fight often, after which the girl's mother often cried. Then he stopped coming home. The father slept over. Camille realized that there was an unhealthy atmosphere in the house, and it would not end well. However, Camille couldn't understand why her parents were fighting, and so she asked her mother, "Why do you and her father fight so often? Do you really want to know?" "I do. I want us to live like we used to, happily and as a family. And I don't want you to cry." "Then go and ask your father why we fight with him." The girl nodded to her mother in response, and when her father came, she turned to him with the same question. The father looked at his daughter carefully, and then called her back to the children's room and put her on a chair, and sat opposite him. The man nervously ran his palm through his hair and then said, "Daughter, you are not so small, and some things should understand. Anyway, I've fallen out of love with your mother, and I want to divorce her. I wanted to talk to you about it earlier, but I didn't dare. Divorcing my mom won't affect our relationship. I just won't live here, but I'll visit you. Dad, is there another woman in your life? That's a serious question. I'll be honest with you. You're right. I have a woman I love and want to live with. You've made your point. I don't want to talk to you anymore, roughly said the girl and rushed to the bathroom, where she gave vent to tears. Now Camille understood her mother, who had been crying a lot lately. After this conversation with her father, a few days passed, and the man soon packed his things and left their family. Camille became withdrawn after Papa's departure. She was incredibly hurt that her father had betrayed her and her mom for another woman. And the girl's mother, after she was abandoned by her husband, just sobbed and cursed her fate. At first, Camille's father visited her, coming once a week to school after lessons. However, Camille did not talk to him and tried to get away from her father as soon as possible. This continued for a month, and the man began to come to school less and less often. Meanwhile, the girl's mother, in order to somehow survive the betrayal, began to impose on strong drinks. Even not perfectly understood that the mother degenerates every day. And when once again the father appeared at school, the girl told him everything and asked him to talk to her mother. The man looked sadly at his daughter and said that he would not do this. And then he added, "Your mom is a grown woman and should understand what she is doing. And I also want to say that now I will rarely visit you. You don't spoil me much with your visits anyway. There's a reason for that. I have a woman I live with who's expecting a baby in the near future, and now I'm gonna have a lot on my mind. You must realize that a baby needs a lot of attention." That's a great thing to say. You're telling your own daughter. So I don't want to be taken care of. Get out then, and you cannot appear in my life at all. Barely holding back her sobs, the girl said, "I understand that you are offended at the moment. Be patient a little. As soon as the baby is born and grows up, I will visit you more often. You should be happy because you'll have a sister I'll introduce you to. I've told you everything. Go away. And don't show up with anyone. I don't want to meet anyone. I hate you and despise you," the girl said quickly and hurried home. Camille couldn't wait to cry, but she didn't want to do it in front of her father. As soon as Camille got home, she rushed to her room and burst into tears. She wanted her mother to be there to tell her about her conversation with her father. However, when her mother came home drunk, the girl lost all desire to tell her mother anything. A few days passed. Camille came home and was very surprised to find the front door unlocked. Camille remembered exactly that she had closed the door. The girl entered the room and saw that her mother was sitting in the kitchen with tea and a cat on the table. Camille involuntarily wrinkled her nose and said to Mama, "Are you drinking again? For some reason, it wasn't at work that I got fired. Can you imagine, my daughter? Such a valuable employee was kicked out of the company. What are we going to do now? I'll look for a new job. Don't worry, everything will be fine. It's all your father's fault. He left us to our fate." Camille hoped her mother would go to look for a new job the next day, but she didn't. The girl's mother drank heavily for almost a week while she had money. When the finances ran out, she started selling gold jewelry first, and then she started selling things. This went on for some time. Camille tried her best to convince her mother to stop drinking, but she, being drunk, drove away her daughter. Camille realized that soon they would not be able to buy bread. The girl did not know what to do. Camille began to feel hungry all the time, as her mother rarely cooked at home, and lately her mother began to leave in the evening and come back in the morning and again drunk. That's when Camille decided to talk to Emily's class teacher. She told the teacher about her life. The teacher listened attentively to the school drill and then said to the girl, "You can't live like this. I will try to talk to your mom, but I am afraid it will be a waste of time. The only thing I can offer you is to live in an orphanage, where you will be properly taken care of. Maybe the termination of parental rights will make your mom reconsider her views on life, and she will give up her addiction. And don't get me wrong that after your story I will have to contact the guardianship authorities anyway, because I have to respond to the fact that my student does not finish her meals and often stays home alone at night. The very next day, Emily tried to talk to Camille's mother, but the conversation did not work, as the landlady was in an inadequate state. The teacher made another attempt 2 days later, but the situation was repeated. And then the teacher detained the girl after lessons and told her it was useless to talk to your mom. I ask you not to take offense at me, but I'm appealing to the guardianship authorities. I just don't have a way out. I'm not offended. I've been thinking about your words for a long time, and it seems to me that I would be much better off in an orphanage now. You see, I'm just afraid that I'll go down a crooked path and start stealing from stores so that I won't feel hungry. Good for you for thinking that way. Don't despair. Maybe when you get to the orphanage, your mom will realize that she might lose her own daughter. And soon Camille showed up at the orphanage. Now she was sitting there thinking about her mother and whether it was right for her to want to live in this institution. Camille was distracted from her thoughts by a woman's voice that said, "Sitting alone again as your peers rampage outside." The girl turned around and looked at the woman with a smile. It was Evelyn, the cleaning lady. Camille had become friends with her. A month after coming here, all the children at the orphanage thought Evelyn was a woman. Camille had a different opinion of the janitor. She liked it when the janitor affectionately called her by her first name and asked her how her day was going. Evelyn walked over to the girl and sat down next to her. The older woman already knew Camille's story. For what reasons the child had ended up in the orphanage, the cleaning lady herself did not understand what made her feel special toward this withdrawn girl. And now, seeing the pensive Camille, she quietly turned to her. What she was dreaming about at the moment. Honestly, about my mom in my life. Tell me, if it's not a secret. I've been waiting a long time for my mom to come and take me away from here. But she never even visited me once. And now I was wondering if I was right to want to live in an orphanage. And now I realize that I was right. I don't need the pits at all. And I have an aversion to her. I feel like pretty soon I'm just gonna hate her. You can't say that about your own mother. You know, I grew up in an orphanage too. My mom gave me up when I was a baby. And at first, I had the same thoughts as you. But as I've grown up, I've changed my mind drastically. Tell me why. Interested? Camille asked. I'll try to explain it to you with my own example. As soon as I left the orphanage, I entered medical school. When I graduated, I met a young man named Roman. This guy started courting me, and soon we both realized that we loved each other. Soon we had a wedding with him. And then we had our firstborn son, who was named Constantine. And now I come to the most important part. Why did I stop hating my mother? It's because with my husband I lived in peace and harmony. We had a wonderful son. You see, I've been a happy woman all these years. And now you just imagine that if my mother had not given birth to me, I would not have experienced any of this, because I would not be in this world. And that's why I am grateful to my mother for giving me life. And let my mother left me in the hospital, but I do not blame her, because it is quite possible that she had good reasons for it. But you know my story, don't you? My mom's only good reason was to drink hard liquor. Your mom slipped up. She's a weak person. Not everyone can be a strong person. Don't just hate her. Believe that you'll grow up. You'll have a happy life. And you will thank your mom more than once for living in this world. Smiling, said the old woman. I don't know. Maybe you are right about that. And tell me, why do you work as a cleaner if you have a nursing education? That's a separate story. At one time I worked as a nurse in a children's clinic. When the years passed, I retired, but continued to work. But soon the management told me that it was necessary to give way to young staff. I had to quit. I did not regret it, as I had a loving husband with me. And my son at that time got married and left for another city. And after I was retired and sitting at home, my husband passed away a year later. And why did you go back to work after that? I come understand. Sitting alone in four walls is not a particularly pleasant occupation. You're so young, you wouldn't realize it. I just started to feel lonely. And then my son took out a mortgage to buy an apartment. He needed help with the money. So I decided that I'd rather work than just stay at home beating around the bush. And now I've been working here for 4 years, and I've never regretted it. Why don't the children from the orphanage treat you well? I think that this is a question you should ask your peers, not me, Evelyn said with a smile. And then she added, and to find out the answers of boys and girls, you need to talk to them, not stay away from them. Years of life went by. Everything was also kept aloof from peers. Both the boys and the orphanage staff were used to it by now, except that Evelyn was dissatisfied with the fact that Camille was not a sociable child and often talked to the girl about it. And the girl, in turn, in response, only kept silent. Time flew by, and now Camille has already turned 18 years old. It was time for the girl to start living on her own. And the day before Camille had to leave the orphanage, she was approached by a cleaning lady who said, "You're starting a new epoch in your life. You must be careful, because living on your own, you can make a lot of mistakes. I know that the state gave you a one-room apartment somewhere in the periphery, but that's okay. The main thing is that you have your own corner. The only place you've been allocated is there. There's no furniture. I already thought of that. I'll buy you a kitchen table with 4 stools. It'll be a housewarming gift. A bed and a dresser. I'll give them from my son's room. He doesn't need this furniture, but it'll be good for you. I'll give you some of the kitchen utensils. Of course, you've got to give me something to eat. When I decide to visit you, if you don't mind, I'll always be glad to have you here. You've been so supportive while I've been here. I'll be eternally grateful. Oh, don't give me that big talk. And what kind of gratitude is there to be thankful for? Why don't you tell me what you're gonna do? How are you gonna get out of here? I want to be an announcer, and I'm gonna try to get into college. And of course, I'll look for part-time work in the evenings to make a living. And if you don't get in, believe me, it happens a lot. I'll get a job, and in a year I'll try again." And soon Camille moved into a studio apartment. She quickly got settled in and immediately got to know her neighbor. It was a middle-aged woman whose name was Wendy. Soon Camille tried to enter the institute, but disappointment awaited her. The girl missed a few points. After she found out that she was unlucky with the enrollment, she came home in a bad mood. She wanted to cry with grief. Camille only sat down on the bed as she received a call on her cell phone from Evelyn, who asked how things were going. The girl tried not to cry and mouthed, "I didn't get in, and I had so much faith in my abilities." That says what? That you shouldn't be overconfident. Just write that you're going to make your beautiful face raw and put it aside for the moment. Otherwise, I'll scold you like a little girl who went to the wrong potty. The old woman said sternly, "Do you know how to cheer up?" Laughing, the girl said, "That's great. What are your plans now?" "Well, I'm going to look for a job. I need finances to live on." A few days later, the girl got a job in a flower pavilion. The manager at first worked together with Camille, helping her to learn the art of how to beautifully design a bouquet. And after a couple of weeks, the director of the pavilion, Jenna, approved the girl's actions and said that now she could work independently. Camille was happy because she was praised by the director. And so the first day came when Camille went out to work at the pavilion. One girl was very worried, but the first shift went out without any misunderstandings. And on the second day, Camille went to work without worrying that she would not be able to fulfill her duties. The first month flew by as Camille worked in the flower pavilion. The girl enjoyed going to work. One day, a young man came to see her and immediately complimented Camille on her good looks. Camille often heard such words from representatives of the stronger sex and calmly treated them. But this young man said the compliment in a special way, and the girl looked at him with interest. Meanwhile, the guy said, "Can I buy a bouquet of flowers that will reflect your beauty?" Camille, hearing this, laughed and handed the visitor a bouquet of decorative daisies. The young man, seeing the flowers, also laughed and said, "You obviously underestimate yourself. And to be honest, I need the bouquet to give to my friend's girlfriend. It's her birthday today." Camille looked around at the ready bouquets and then chose gladioli. She handed the flowers to the young man and said that such a bouquet should be to the girl's taste. The guy took the mustache and paid and then asked permission to see Camille off in the evening. Camille was not ready for this and therefore refused. Soon the visitor left. The girl had worked her shift and was getting ready to close the pavilion when she saw again the guy who had complimented her today. She looked questioningly at the young man and asked him if he needed another bouquet. "No flowers today. I just want to see you off. But I already refused your request." "All right. Then sell me a bouquet of white roses." Camille complied with the visitor's request, and he took the flowers and put them on the counter, saying that the roses were bought for her. And after that, the guy left the pavilion. The girl was surprised by the stranger's behavior, and at that moment thought that the young man was strange. After this incident, a couple of days passed, and Camille already closed the pavilion and was going to go home. Suddenly, she was called by a lover of daisies. "Would you give me a couple of minutes?" Camille looked at the stranger and recognized him as the man who had recently given her roses. The young man stood near the foreign car and elbowed her. The girl asked what the guy wanted, and the one after her words came up to her and answered that he could not wait to get acquainted with the beauty. Camille did not know how to act in this situation and therefore said, "Let's not do this. And I disgust you." The young man said in surprise, "I didn't say that. I'm just not used to it. Getting acquainted like that. You're putting a price on yourself," sarcastically said the stranger. And then he added, "How long do you have to be groomed to tell me your name?" "All right, you're on. My name is Camille. Now we're talking. And my name is Stephen. Let's get you a ride in the car." "If you want a ride, I'm not getting in the car on foot." Stephen nodded and followed the girl. The young man told different anecdotes about Camille laughed. The girl noted to herself that the new acquaintance was an excellent conversationalist and easy to communicate with, and soon the couple approached Camille's house. Camille thanked the guy for seeing her off, but Stephen stopped her and asked for permission to take a leisurely walk with her again tomorrow. The girl, after some thought, agreed. When she got home, Camille involuntarily thought about the man. It suddenly seemed to her that perhaps this man was her soulmate. And then she pushed these thoughts away from her, realizing that she did not know Stephen at all to allow such thoughts. All the following week, the young man met the girl from work almost every day. From him, she learned that he was 24 years old and studying at the institute. The guy also said that he lived on his own in a 2-room apartment. Stephen said that his father is engaged in business and his mother is a housewife. When Camille heard all this, she said with a smile, "You're just like a major." "That's right. I think I am, too, and it doesn't offend me. Why did I tell you all about me? You haven't told me anything about your own person. I'm also interested to know who your parents are, why you work in a flower pavilion and not study." Camille looked at the guy and said that she was a pupil of an orphanage. She did not tell him the reason why she had gotten there. She was uncomfortable to admit that her mom consumed strong drinks. Stephen, when he heard that Camille was from the orphanage, looked at her in a strange way. This look was noticed by the girl, and she asked what was wrong. The guy at the same moment smiled welcomingly and said that everything was fine, and then invited the interlocutor to come to visit him. Camille refused. It seemed to her that it was too early to be alone with Stephen. The young man, when he heard that Camille did not want to visit, said reproachfully, "And I thought we trusted each other. But it turned out to be completely different. I get the feeling you think I'm a monster." "You're wrong. You're a nice guy, but I'd rather get some fresh air than sit in an apartment. But it's better to get some fresh air than to sit in an apartment. You and I have plenty of time. Take me up on my offer. By the way, I have a large soap collection. I know my hobby sounds weird, but I collect soap." "Interesting. With a smile said a girl and thought, and why not really come to visit? Well, at least for an hour. The young man, seeing the doubts of the interlocutor, immediately said, I'll get you home safe and sound, and you will choose the soap you like. You can even have several and take it from me as president. The girl looked at Stephen and agreed. The couple got into the car and the car started. Camille was riding in a foreign car for the first time. She was inspecting the interior. The young man was discreetly observing it. When the girl turned her attention to the road, the guy asked if she liked the car. Camille enthusiastically concluded that the car was wonderful. She added that it must be very expensive. Stephen voiced the cost, and the interlocutor, ouch, nodded. The driver, seeing her reaction, laughed. Soon the couple was already in Stephen's apartment. The girl immediately assessed the atmosphere and softly mumbled that everything here is arranged with taste. The young man smiled and replied that it was the merit of his mother. And then the owner of the apartment offered the guests to drink a glass of sparkling wine. But Camille flatly refused. Then Stephen opened the bar and took out a bottle of liquor from there. He dug it out and splashed the liquid into the shot glasses with the words, I bought it when I suggested you buy it from Aristov. This drink is not quoted in the orphanage. You must be used to Belenka. The girl from these words of the guy shuddered as from a blow, and sharply said that she does not use strong drinks at all, and then said that if he once again allowed himself to talk to her in this way, then their communication on this note stops. The guy smiled in response and asked his guest to relax, promising that he would not allow himself to do that again. And then Stephen poured himself a strong drink and emptied the glass. The girl, seeing this, involuntarily wrinkled her nose. Then she asked to see the soap collection. The owner of the apartment cordially agreed to fulfill Camille's request and invited her into the bathroom, where the original shelf on the entire wall was pierced, on which were arranged pieces of soap. The girl began to look at the collection with curiosity. Meanwhile, the young man had left the bathroom and had another 100 grams of hard liquor before returning to his visit. Stephen watched as Camille stood on tiptoe and took out first one bar of soap, which she brought to her nose and inhaled the aroma, and then the next. The man felt at that moment a desire to possess this girl right now at this moment enveloped him, and he wrapped his arms around Camille and his hands and turns her to face him, and then starts to tear off the girl's blouse. Camille screamed out loudly for him to leave her alone. However, the guy picked up the guest in his arms and carried her to the couch. Camille was already well aware of what the owner of the apartment was going to do. And then she screamed, "Stop, please. I don't want it to happen like this. After all, I haven't been intimate with a man once before. Not to build for myself, not to cross the road from the orphanage. And they've been doing it there since they were 12. Just be a decent girl now, and we'll give each other pleasure." Camille tried to push the young man away, but the forces were unequal, and after a while Stephen lay on his back and breathed often. And the girl, tucking her legs under her belly, barely audible, was crying. The owner of the apartment, literally after a few minutes from breathing, said, "And you did not deceive me. It turned out, in fact, pious diva, but you pass. You liked it too, didn't you? But tell me the truth, I will now rest, and we can continue." After these words, the girl jumped to her feet and ran to the kitchen, where she grabbed a knife. As soon as Stephen began to approach her, she screamed exhaustedly that she would take her own life if he came near her. The landlord snorted and calmly replied, "I don't need to touch you. I've had mine. Now you can go to all four sides. By the way, you can choose a few bars of soap from the collection. That's your pleasure fee. If you want to meet me, you'll find my address here. Oh, and one more thing. Don't go to the police because my father has connections there. You're only hurting yourself by doing this." The girl looked at the guy with hatred and quickly got dressed, then ran out of the apartment. Camille knew that it was a long way for her to get home, and it would be better to take transportation. But she felt like people knew what had just happened and were looking at her with judgment. So Camille decided that she would get home on her own. Soon the girl was already in the apartment, where she immediately rushed into the bathroom. She wanted to wash herself off with the touch of Stephen's hands. Camille rubbed her body with exasperation, silent. Then Camille sank to the bottom of the tub and sobbed bitterly. The next day, Camille asked the director of the flower pavilion for a day off. The girl told the supervisor that she felt disgusting. The supervisor advised her to call a doctor and said she would work by herself for a few days, while Camille is not feeling well. The girl has been manifesting at home for several days. She did not answer her neighbors' calls, and also the cleaner of the orphanage. Camille just wanted to be at home for a while and hoped that she would succeed. However, Evelyn thought quite differently, who was concerned that the ward was not answering her calls, and the elderly woman initially went to the girl's workplace, and after finding out why Camille was absent from the pavilion, she had already gone to her home. The elderly woman rang the doorbell for a long time, and then, realizing she wouldn't get that one opened, said loudly, "I know you're home. If you don't open the door, I'll break it down. And you know very well that I will." Camille, knowing the temper of the cleaning lady, I realized that Evelyn would do as the girl said, opened the door and saw the worried face, the elderly woman. Camille smiled tiredly and invited the guest to pass. Evelyn looked at the wards and sternly asked what had happened. Camille did not want to tell the cleaning lady anything, and so she lied to her that she had quarreled with a young man. The guests looked at the girl with amazement and muttered, "That's the guy you're killing for. The one you just met. I don't understand you. Did you fall in love so quickly? Let's go to the kitchen and have a cup of tea, and you can tell me all about it." Camille realized that Evelyn would have to lie, so she quickly made up stories. She told the elderly woman that she had quarreled with the young man because he had forbidden her to work. The guest, hearing the explanation, only laughed and remained silent. "That's a silly reason for a quarrel. You should have told your boyfriend that you need something to live on. And if he's going to support you, let him do it. I'm not gonna tell him anything. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Maybe I could have a mother-son talk with him." "No way. Better tell me how things are going at the orphanage." The landlady spoke, trying to distract Evelyn from the dangerous topic. Time moved slowly. Camille went to work and then went straight home. Stephen did not appear in her life. What was the girl glad of? She wanted to cut this man out of her life completely and never think of him. So Camille got up in the morning as usual. She had to go to work. As Camille felt sick, she rushed to the restroom, where she immediately threw up. The girl was puzzled as to what had happened to her, but immediately she tried to put all thoughts about her health aside as she had to get ready for work. Camille hoped that the nausea would go away during the day, but it did not. The young woman came home irritated after a day of work. She was depressed about her own physical condition and did not even eat dinner that day. She went to bed early. The next day, the same thing happened again. The girl felt nauseous all the time. After work, she went to the store to buy milk, which she loved very much and allowed herself to buy on rare occasions. Camille went to the counter and wanted to take a bottle. She realized that if she took even a sip of milk, she would immediately vomit. Camille did not buy anything and went home. When she got home, the girl sat down on the bed. The doorbell rang. Camille opened it and saw a neighbor who was holding fried pies on a plate. The woman unceremoniously entered the apartment and spoke. "I want to treat you to some baked goods. I happened to buy fuel milk today." "Oh, don't even remind me of milk. It makes me sick at one word," said the girl, looking at her saliva. "I don't understand you. You've always loved milk, and now you're sick of it. I've been sick of it since yesterday. I thought it would go away today, but it didn't. How's your stool?" "It's fine. I'm walking. It's not poisoning. You know, sweetheart, all your symptoms indicate that you're pregnant. I have a pretty good idea who the father of this baby is. I've seen your young man out the window a few times with you, only now he's gone missing. If I were you, I'd go to the drugstore and get a test. I'm not a gynecologist, but trust me, you're definitely in the right place. Don't be silly. I won't drink tea because I'm tired at work. I'm sleepy. With a slightly noticeable irritation muttered the landlady of the apartment, who at this minute wanted Wendy to go to her room. The neighbor, hearing that she was being beaten about missing, resentfully pressed her lips together and quickly left. As soon as the woman left the apartment, Camille began to pack quickly. She only wanted to buy a pregnancy test after Wendy's words. The girl was able to allow the thought that she could have gotten pregnant by the rascal. Camille bought the test and persevered with the appropriate procedure. The girl was very worried. She absolutely did not want to give birth to a child from Stephen, who had done such a thing to her. When the test showed positive results, Camille squatted down and cried desperately. The young woman did not know what to do in this situation. The first thing that came to mind was to talk to Evelyn and tell her everything honestly. Camille received a call from the cleaning lady and asked her to come to visit her tomorrow. The elderly woman readily agreed and asked what to take for tea. Camille replied that there was no need to bring any guests since she had Krieger. Evelyn wanted to ask her mentee something else, but she said that the whole conversation would take place tomorrow. The next day in the evening, the old woman was already sitting at Camille's house. The landlady, with her head down, told how she had visited Stephen and how it had all ended. Evelyn listened attentively to Camille and asked what she was going to do. Camille tearfully said she wanted to terminate the pregnancy. When the guest heard this, she said softly, "And you are sure of your decision?" Very often it happens that after such procedures women can no longer have children. But we have modern medicine, and I have nothing to fear. Just understand, if I give birth to this child, this baby will remind me all the time what he did. I am afraid that I hate this child. I'm also afraid that the child will inherit the father's genes and be just as much of a rascal in life. Wait, this is where it all comes together. Is that too much to be afraid of? Let me get this straight. What about medicine? You know, there's a saying that goes, there's a silver lining. That's the case with you. Let's move on. That the child will resemble his father, but it won't. As soon as you put the baby to the breast to feed, you'll realize that this baby is yours alone. Now, about genes. What do genes have to do with it? You're gonna raise the baby. What you put into it is what you'll reap. I'm not in any way trying to talk you into keeping the baby. I'm just trying to make you realize that you have to make these decisions consciously, not in haste, when emotions are running high. And that's what you're going through right now. My advice to you is to go to a gynecologist and make sure that you are pregnant, since tests can also give wrong results. If the pregnancy is confirmed, then check with the doctor until what term you can think about whether to keep the baby or not. And only after that, make a decision. After a while, Camille had already been to the women's clinic and knew for sure that she was in an interesting position. The young woman had contradictory feelings. On the one hand, she was pleased that life had begun inside her. But on the other hand, when she thought of Stephen, she felt disgusted with the child. Camille procrastinated for a long time and then made the choice that she would give birth to this baby, and it would be a joy in her life. The young woman was informed about her decision by the orphanage worker, who was happy to hear the news and immediately said that she would give the stroller as a gift as a grandmother. After Evelyn learned that the ward would give birth, she came to visit her and from the threshold said that it was necessary to have a serious talk. Camille was surprised at this and invited the elderly woman into the guest room and sat down and looked at the landlady carefully and only then spoke. Having a baby is good, but you need to think about the financial side. You have to persuade your manager to make you an official salesperson. That way you'll get an allowance. And if she refuses, find a way to get the director of the flower pavilion to agree. You'll need that money to live on in the future. You know, I don't just give advice. After all, I've lived most of my life already. And please don't put off this conversation with your supervisor until later. Camille, after this conversation with Evelyn, turned to her supervisor. Jenna promised to think about it. And now a month has passed since that conversation, and the supervisor has remained silent on the subject. Camille again talked to her supervisor about official employment. Jenna promised that she would do it in a week. However, a month passed, but the supervisor did not lift a finger on the matter. And when Camille tried to talk about it again, the supervisor pointed to the young woman's slightly bulging belly and said, "Do you want me to pay you benefits? But that's not going to happen. Why would I transfer my money to nowhere?" "You don't say." "What do you mean, nowhere? This money will be a great help to us. As soon as the baby's old enough, I'm going back to work for you." My answer to you: "No, you work one more week and then I'm firing you. You're a good girl." Yeah, she's helping the unmarried. And I'm not going to. Camille was stunned by Jenna's answer. Camille seemed to have developed a good relationship with her supervisor. After all, when the supervisor asked to stay longer after the workday, the girl willingly complied with her request. And now that Camille had been refused, she was extremely offended that she had received such a reward for all her hard work. Camille recounted this conversation with the director of Evelyn's flower pavilion. The elderly woman was outraged after hearing the news. She wanted to go and talk to Jenna herself and tell the manager that she was acting illegally. That's one thing. And secondly, decent people don't do that. Camille talked the old lady out of it. She said, "You won't get anything out of it. I worked unofficially, and that says it all. It's my own fault for not having thought of this earlier, to formalize an employment contract." Soon Camille was out of work. The young woman was handed as she realized that the salary she received after she stopped working in the flower pavilion would not be enough for a long time. So Camille began to pound various structures in order to find some kind of work before the payment of maternity benefits. However, she was denied everywhere, and seeing that she is in an interesting position, and still the young woman found a job. True, it paid a pittance. The girl had to hand out advertising booklets on the street. Camille realized that she earns a pittance here, but at the moment she was happy about it. Time flew by, and now the young woman gave birth to a baby girl, whom she named Vanessa. Camille fondly felt the little bundle and mentally thanked the cleaning lady, who had made her realize that the decision should be made without any violent thoughts. Camille realized that it was only thanks to that conversation with the technician that she had kept the baby under her heart. And now that baby was born from the maternity ward. Camille was greeted by Evelyn. The elderly woman accepted the small package from the nurse's hands and suddenly cried. Camille was puzzled why the cleaning lady was crying now and asked her about it. "You should be happy. Are you crying? Why? I'm glad you made the right decision at the right time. And now I answer to my granddaughter." Time has slowly moved on. Camille enjoyed learning the role of a mother. She was busy practicing with her daughter. All the motherly duties she lovingly performed. And even when Vanessa switched from day to night, it didn't work for the young woman to have to adjust to a child. It had been a month since Camille had become a mom. And at this point, Camille clearly realized that the allowance was completely inadequate for living. Her daughter needed to buy formula, which cost a lot of money, and she also had to buy shipping, oils, baby soap, and other baby products for the baby. The young woman was at a loss, and it was the first time she had not paid her utility bill. Another 2 months passed. Camille lost weight during this time, as she denied herself food, only to be fed. Camille's daughter helped Evelyn, but only in small amounts. The elderly woman saw perfectly well how difficult it was for her ward, and one day a conversation took place between the cleaning lady and Camille. Camille said to the technician in despair, "I don't know what to do. I was already thinking of putting my daughter in an orphanage for a while and visiting her there. And as soon as she's a little older, I'll take her out of there and get a job in the meantime. That's the stupidest decision I've ever heard. If you do that, you'll lose Vanessa forever. You'd have to give up your parental rights if you did that. Do you even think about what you're saying? I don't know how to make ends meet." With tears in her eyes, said the girl. and immediately added other children at this age have cribs. My daughter still sleeps in the stroller you gave us. The crib is not the most important thing. I'll try to give you a little more money. I don't feel comfortable accepting finances from you anymore. I don't know when I'll be able to pay you back. I'd like to get a job, and then everything will change. After this conversation, about 2 weeks passed, and Evelyn came to visit Camille. The old woman went into the kitchen and put a box with a long cake on the table. The landlady looked at her guest with bewilderment and asked what kind of celebration. The cleaning lady smiled and said, "Celebrating my dismissal from work. I've become too old to carry big buckets of water. And now I've decided to retire. And the salary at the orphanage is tiny. I'll be with Vanessa from now on. And you're trying to get a job, but you still need to help your son. I haven't forgotten about that. They'll cut back on their rations. There's no other option. Although there is one other option, which is to go to the father, establish paternity with DNA, and then demand child support from him. Don't ever say that to me again. I'll never go to what? This is my child and mine alone. Consider me." Vanessa started from the wind in the field with a challenge, exclaimed Camille. "You see, so there's only one way out. I sit busy and you look for a job. Did I like the way you stood up to Stephen just now?" Evelyn said with a smile. A few days later, Camille got a job as a salesman in a small market not far from home. The young woman was attracted by the fact that the market had a convenient schedule. It was necessary to come to 7 o'clock, and the Labor Day ended at 14:00. The only thing that marred the girl was not particularly high wages, about which she told Evelyn. The old woman said in response that she found something to be upset about. "Your salary is higher than the one I received when I worked in the orphanage." Soon Camille went to work. She was a little uneasy, as she had never worked with weighty goods. However, her employer explained everything in detail and spent the day with her, helping the girl to cope with selling vegetables. And so already Camille worked for 3 days at the market. Here the girl met her neighbor Molly, who was selling fruit. The women talked to each other, and Molly in one of the conversations unexpectedly dropped that Camille had hired an employer for nothing. The woman looked at her interlocutor with surprise and asked her why she had said that. Molly embarrassed Cashin, and then, waving her hand, spoke out, "And what will I hide it from you? All the same, after all, the truth will tell you others. The thing is that your boss Nancy very often changed salespeople. Regular customers will tell you that soon enough. I've had a couple of people tell me that there's a new salesperson again, but I didn't pay much attention to it. And why Nancy and the salesman do not linger. The answer is simple, constant shortages. At Sveta's, the longest that the sellers have worked is 4 months, as far as I remember." A few days after this conversation, there was an unpleasant incident at Camille's workplace. Toward the end of the workday, as usual, Nancy and her husband arrived to pick up the proceeds. Camille counted out the money and held it out to the supervisor, who looked at the financials and grudgingly said that the amount was too small. Camille narrowed her eyes and replied that they had overpriced vegetables, and customers often left for competitors. Nancy, hearing this, said that one should be able to interest the person who approached the goods and not rely on high prices. The businesswoman then approached the vegetables and inspected them meticulously. Nancy then saw some affected tomatoes. She took out the tomatoes and placed them in front of Camille. The woman looked at the woman perplexed and said quietly, "Vegetables have a way of spoiling. It's not my fault. I agree with you on that. But spoiled goods should be weighed and recorded and kept separately. But I did. I just didn't have time to put these tomatoes aside," Camille said, and quickly took out a notebook in which she wrote down the spoiled vegetables. The girl held out her notes to Nancy. The businesswoman took a quick look at the notebook and spoke in a stern voice. "All this will be deducted from your wages. And now these tomatoes can be taken to your home. How's that? And yesterday's game was cucumbers. I gave them to you. Are you going to take them out of my paycheck too? But that's not fair." Almost crying, said the girl. It's not for me to teach you how to work with goods. You did not rush to me, so you should do your job. If you see that you have a spoilage of this or that kind of vegetables, you try to block it. From this day on, you are responsible for all spoiled tomatoes, cucumbers, and so on. Camille was walking home after a day's work in high spirits. As soon as she entered the apartment, Evelyn approached her and raised her index finger to her lips. That meant it was worth talking in a whisper. It meant it was worth talking in whispers since Vanessa was asleep. The old woman, seeing Camille in a bad mood, immediately realized that the girl was in trouble. She asked Camille to go to the kitchen and asked her what was wrong. The girl took out the tomatoes and put them on the table. And only then she told what had happened. And at the end of her narrative, she added, "I don't know how to weigh people. I am ashamed to do it. I will not hide that I add a few grams somewhere. I was advised to do so by a neighbor who sells nearby. But how can I answer the customers if I have a kilogram of tomatoes, for example, will rot? Do not be upset. From work a month and see what salary you get. If it will be pennies, then there's nothing to stay there." A month went by and an audit was done. Nancy informed Camille that there was a shortage and told her the amount. The girl was already ready for it, so without too many questions, the businesswoman offered to deduct the shortage. Then she informed Nancy that she was no longer working for her. The next day, Camille again went to look for work at the market where she worked. The girl did not want to go, and that was one reason not to go out with Nancy. Camille decided that it was possible to find a position as a vendor at the bazaar, which was a few stops away from her home. The girl remembered Evelyn's advice, and so she wanted to get a job selling piece goods. Camille was lucky right away. She saw several advertisements at the entrance to the market for sellers. Camille approached one employer, and he said he would be happy to hire her. The girl immediately asked about the salary, and the man voiced the amount. Camille has been drinking since morning, looked at the entrepreneur, and said that this is paltry money. The employer smirked and said, "I do not know you, my dear, so there will be a trial period. If we work out, well, in the sense that there will be no shortages, then in a couple of months your salary will increase. That's what all the entrepreneurs do around here. Maybe you should check it out." The girl sighed dejectedly and agreed to the man's proposal. And then she went on to look at the other sellers' merchandise. It was only when Camille walked a little farther away that she was stopped by a woman who was selling toys. The stranger spoke up. "I heard that you are tuning up for work. Well, I can tell you that all these entrepreneurs promise to raise wages after a while, but not all of them keep their promises. Are you saying that the man I hired will cheat me too? I don't know anything about him. I'm talking about me. I've been working here for about 4 months now, and I've had no complaints. And I was promised a raise. They're still giving me a raise. I'm out of options, so I'm going to have to take my chances and work for this man." Camille left the market after talking to the saleswoman and went to the bus stop. The girl felt disappointed that things were going wrong for her. She thought she would find a job where she would get a great salary, but everything turned out to be exactly the opposite. Soon the bus pulled up. The girl entered the transportation and sat down on the empty seats, but 2 girls were already sitting against her and talking animatedly. Camille, to distract herself from bitter thoughts, involuntarily began to listen to the dialogue of strangers. Initially, Camille realized that they were 2 former classmates who had met after a while and were discussing their peers who were in the same class. Soon Camille got tired of listening to the girls and wanted to turn her attention to the view from the window. So she heard what the brunette said, addressing her interlocutor. "Do you remember Miranda from our class, who always wore her older sister's clothes? We used to make fun of her for it all the time. You wouldn't believe it. I saw her the other day at the coffee shop where I was sitting with my son. I was stunned at how Katya looked originally. I didn't even believe it was her. I called out her name. Miranda smiled at me and moved to the table next to me. I stared at her with my mouth hanging open. It was a luxurious girl, which is immediately obvious that she visits expensive beauty salons. About the way she is dressed, I'm not talking at all. She has fashionable pants, a suit of such a coastal color, and in that to it in sandals. Practically on all fingers descendants and a gold ring. If in general to say, then in front of me was a stylish girl who knows her own price. Katya, whom we knew as the poorest in school. Probably married well, replied the person I was talking to. But you are wrong. She is not married, and is not even in a hurry. Then how did she succeed in life? The second girl asked, perplexed. This was curious for me too, and I asked her about it. Miranda answered that she earns money with her body. She said it so simply that I was very sweet of her answer. I asked her if doing it for money is disgusting. The answer was simple. Miranda said that now she can afford what she wants to do. And as for whether it is disgusting or not, she said that she treats it like a job. I was taken aback by this news. I don't even have the words to describe it. And further, Camille did not hear what the brunette said in response, because after the lecturer announced Camille's stop, the girl got off the bus and went home, thinking about the conversation between the two former classmates. Just then, the young woman saw a bench and sat down on it. She thought about this Miranda who earns money this way. Camille sat for a while as a call came from her neighbor. Wendy reported that Evelyn had become ill and had been rushed to the hospital. Then the neighbor added that Vanessa was at her place. Camille rose abruptly from the bench and ran home. The young woman immediately went to her, where she learned that Evelyn suddenly felt pain in her chest and called Wendy. She in turn called an ambulance, and the older woman was hospitalized. Camille was frightened. She was worried about the pensioner's condition. Camille called the hospital to find out how Evelyn was doing, but I answered that the woman was now in intensive care and all answers would not be available until the next day. Camille slumped down in her chair after the call. She already realized that tomorrow she would not go to any work because Vanessa had no one to leave her with. And also the girl realized that the pensioner would need medicine, which means that she would need finances. All these thoughts made the young woman cry. She was well aware that there was nowhere to go for help at the moment. The next day, Camille put her daughter in the stroller and went to the hospital. Camille mentally asked the Almighty to make Evelyn feel better. The girl was very afraid of losing her dear person. And here it was not that the old woman helped financially, but in another way, that the pensioner supported Camille morally and did not let her be discouraged. Soon Camille was already sitting in the hospital room opposite Evelyn, who had already been brought back from intensive care. The girl stroked the elderly woman's hand and asked her to hold on. The pensioner smiled at the ward and replied, "To me, don't worry, I made it through. But how will you be now?" "Alone, we are slowly leaving. I have an idea. Let's call your son to come here. It would be nice for you to see him. You're going about it the wrong way. Sweetheart, I'm not going to die, so let your son come here when he gets a chance. And if you're implying that you're asking him for financial help, forget it. My son is having a hard time too. He's paying a mortgage, and he has 3 kids to feed, clothe, and shoe. All right, calm down. I didn't mean to ask him for help. I just thought it would do you good to see your son and get you back on your feet." The turkey thought I was screwed too. He said sternly, "And the woman?" And then she said more softly, "All right. I knew you meant what you said out of the goodness of your heart. You'd better tell me that your job is going great. They said you'd be out in a week. So you have exactly 1 week to rest and get back into action," said Camille Savrasov. Having worked soon, Camille returned home with her daughter after the hospital. The young woman played with Utah for a while and then fed her and put her to bed. Afterward, she sat down on the couch and thought about her deception about Evelyn's job. Camille suddenly realized that she had not just told a lie to the older woman. It had been done intentionally. Camille had made the decision even then that she would go to the track to earn money. The realization that she would be selling her body no longer frightened the girl. Camille realized that she simply had no way out. It would be possible to go to work as a salesman, but the young woman already knew that she lacked the so-called salesmanship. This meant that Camille would have to pay for shortages or damaged goods. You could also work as a dishwasher, but it paid a pittance, and the other girl was not given, as there was no appropriate education, and so Camille decided to go to the highway. After a while, Evelyn was discharged from the hospital. The pensioner was taken away by Camille and her daughter. The girl fondly hugged the old woman and said that she would not allow her to be sick anymore. Evelyn smiled at her ward's words and promised. Evelyn smiled at her mentee's words and promised not to do it at all. A few more days passed after the discharge of the pensioner. Camille informed the elderly woman that she was going to work tomorrow. Evelyn asked the girl what her job was. Camille thought for a while and replied, "How can I put it to you so you understand? Basically, I have to go around the world. Basically, I have to go to businesses and collect signatures. Why collect them? I won't tell you yet, because it's gonna be a rotating assignment every few days. But the upside is that I'll be paid by the number of signatures, which means as soon as I complete the assignment, we'll have the money. That's a weird job. It's the first time I've heard of such a job," the older woman said, perplexed. "There's nothing strange about it. We are not living in the Stone Age after all. There are many specialties now that you have never even heard of. I'm not going to argue with you. You'd better tell me everything after the first day of work." So Camille is getting ready for work. Evelyn is puzzled and asks the mentees why the working day starts so late, and the time was around 15 o'clock. Camille quickly finds an answer and says that at this time, people are better in contact, and therefore the opportunity to collect more signatures increases. And then the girl added that this way she could earn more money. After a while, Camille stood on the highway. She, so that the pensioner did not guess anything, bought a mini skirt and a blouse with a deep neckline in advance. In all these clothes, the girl changed before going out on the highway. And here already Camille stands on the road and waits for the truck. Initially, cars stopped in front of her, and the drivers offered Camille a ride. However, the girl immediately decided that she needed chauffeurs who work as truckers. She herself did not understand why this decision came to her mind, and soon a truck slowed down in front of Camille. A man's head peeked out of the cab. The driver evaluated the girl and offered her a ride. Camille smiled and got into the driver's cab. The man once again looked at her traveling companion and said, "You must be new here, because I haven't seen you here before. And you, I see that you are already a regular here, if you know everyone," said the girl, trying to say so that her voice did not shake from excitement. However, the man as if caught her inner state, and so he asked, "You are obviously going to do this case for the first time. Don't worry, I won't hurt you. I know the rates, and I will pay even a little more than what is required." After a while, Camille was already out of the cab. The young woman adjusted her skirt, and at the same moment heard a man shouting to her that she was gorgeous and that he would like to meet her again. The girl reluctantly waved him off and walked slowly down the road. At the moment, Camille felt dirty. She couldn't stand the urge to shower to wash off the stranger's touch. But Camille forced herself to think about the fact that this was just a job that would help her and not live. The young woman came home. Already as before the evening, Evelyn looked anxiously at the ward, but the latter smiled amiably and said that there was the first earnings, and handed the pensioner the money. The old woman looked at the money and frightenedly said, "Wow, a decent amount for one working day. Today was just a lucky day. There was only one task that needed to be done today. So I tried to collect more signatures. I had to visit a lot of different agencies, but it was worth it. I don't like you coming home alone so late. You're a girl who knows what can happen. You better get fewer signatures and come home earlier. You know, there's a popular wisdom that you can't make all the money you want. That goes for you. We'll see. And now we should be happy that we have finances, and we will be able to buy, not a crib, so that the child sleeps not in a stroller. I'm also very tired as I've been walking a lot. So can I take a shower and go to bed?" Evelyn offered the girl to eat first, and then already take hygienic procedures. but Camille refused. The young woman wanted to actually take a shower and just forget about what she had done today of her own free will. As soon as Camille got to the bed and Evelyn, who had stayed with her tonight because Camille had come home late, was lying next to her, she felt ashamed. The landlady turned to the pensioner in a whisper and apologized for the late visit. The guest stroked her ward in response and asked her not to worry about nothing. Only after these words, Evelyn Camille calmly sighed. Immediately, she was struck by an electric shock. She realized that, doing such work, she had not thought about the most important thing, that she could get pregnant. Camille immediately decided that she would buy birth control tomorrow. The next day, Camille didn't go anywhere. What surprised the pensioner? The elderly woman asked why Camille had the day off today. The girl laughed in response and said that she would not have a job every day. Camille could not admit to Evelyn that today she simply did not want to go to the track, as there was still a residue on her soul from the way she had earned the money. It had been 2 days since Camille had given pleasure to the driver of the truck. It was only after that that the young woman decided to go out on the highway again. It was not an easy decision for her, and it was as if felt by Evelyn, who asked the girl where her office with the management was located. Camille realized that if she didn't make a precise schedule of the so-called work, the pensioner would sound the alarm and start to find out everything herself. So Camille decided that from this day forward, she would go out to the track once every 3 days. Camille had already been working in this way for 2 weeks. During that time, the girl bought her daughter a crib. Camille realized that she could not go on like this forever, and she comforted herself with the fact that it was only until her daughter grew up a little. And then the girl planned to give Anya to the kindergarten and herself to enroll in correspondence studies at the institute. And so Camille once again went out on the highway. She was waiting for a truck, and at the same time remembered the movie Pretty Woman. She liked this movie very much. The girl imagined herself in the role of the main character and dreamed that she would one day happen in her life. She wanted to meet a prince on a white horse who will pull her out of the swamp and will love not only her, but also Anya that. However, the young woman understood that this will not happen, as it only happens in movies, where the plot is invented to interest the viewer. And yet the girl still dreamed about it, realizing that it would not happen to her. Reflections, and the girl was interrupted by a stopped car. Camille looked into the car, and from horror, the whole transport belonged to the husband of her neighbor. And this meant that now the man would start asking unnecessary questions about what she was doing on the highway. And in fact, the car door opened, and the neighbor looked out and said in surprise, "Camille, I didn't expect to see you here. What are you doing here?" "My wife told me you got a job." "That's right, Wendy. But it's my day off. And here I am waiting for a young man. Let's just say I have a date. I'll ask you not to tell your spouse about this. She'll be asking me all kinds of questions." "That's right." Laughing, the man said. And then he added, "My Wendy, curious person wants to know everything about everyone. Only that you chose a meeting with your boyfriend in a not very convenient place." "Yeah, I already realized that." As soon as the neighbor left, Camille breathed a sigh of relief. She'd expected a lot more questions from Wendy's husband, and there weren't many. Now the girl was only worried that the neighbor would not tell about their encounter on the road. Camille knew very well that Wendy often met with Evelyn and could tell the elderly woman that Camille was standing on the highway. And if the old woman found out about it, she wouldn't let up until she knew the whole truth. Camille, on the other hand, absolutely did not want Evelyn to know the way she made her money. A few days passed. Camille was once again standing on the highway, waiting for a truck. And then a beautiful black Jeep stopped in front of her. 2 big guys jumped out of the cabin, who picked up the girl under the elbows and quickly pushed her into the car. The young woman did not even have time to shout, as she was already in the Jeep. And here an obese man turned to her from the front seat, who looked at her carefully and then asked her how long she had been doing this. Camille was startled and said she did not know what he was talking about. Her phrase made the stranger angry, and he spoke harshly. You don't make a pie girl of yourself here. This is my territory. And I have already been informed that there is a young lady who works without taxes. And as it turns out, this young lady is you. So let's be honest. Otherwise, my boys are gonna have a different conversation with you. Camille, looking at the stranger, clearly realized that it was not worth lying to this man because he would keep his word. The girl admitted that she had been out on the track for a little less than a month and immediately added that she didn't do it every day. Hearing the young woman's retort, the man nodded contentedly. Then he said softly, "My name is Sam. Now I see that you're telling the truth and you're a good girl because you figured it out the first time. Now listen to what I have to say. You work on my territory, which means I have to pay tax to the treasury, like any decent citizen. But the treasury for you will not be the state, but my pocket. And in general, on the first of every month, you will bring me a sum of money to my address. If you don't, you realize you'll be dealing with my boys sitting next to you. Now tell me what you got." "I've got you scared," the girl muttered fearfully. "That's great. It's a pleasure doing business with you," said the man and handed Camille a piece of paper on which was written an address and a sum of money. Camille looked at the entry and the window, and then said, but this is a large sum. It's almost half of what I'll earn in a month, and who has an easy life these days? You see, I'm not an unemployment fund. I want to eat good food too. And if you don't like this amount, go work at the factory as a laborer. I didn't force you to go to the highway, so you decide what's good for you. Anyway, this is a short conversation. Either you pay or you're out of here. And I'm waiting for your decision right now." "Okay, I'll do it." After that, the young woman was allowed out of the car. And as soon as Camille left the car, the Jeep drove off. Camille looked after the car and tears rolled down her cheeks. She realized that from now on, she would have to pay back almost half of the money she had earned. After this conversation, the young woman decided that today she would not work. After a while, the girl was already at home. She entered the apartment and saw the surprised face of the pensioner, who asked why she did not come so early. Camille glumly replied that the day had not gone well and there were no errands to run. Evelyn looked at the girl carefully and said sternly, "Don't tell me fairy tales here. Tell me what really happened. I've known you for years, and I can see that you're worried." Camille was about to tell me the truth about where and how she made her money. But then she looked at Evelyn. She felt ashamed to tell the old woman. The girl collected the pensioner again and wrote tall tales that she had not been paid for her assignment today. Evelyn, inquisitive, looked at the interlocutor and helped. "I hope you are not deceiving me. And about the fact that they paid, I understand that it's frustrating. But you can't be too upset about it. Every job has a slip-up. You had one. All right, calm down. Come on, I'll feed you and tell you how we fought the duck today." After Evelyn's words, the girl sighed with relief that the conversation on a dangerous topic was over. And then together with the pensioner went to the kitchen, where she listened to the elderly woman, who enthusiastically told how she spent the day sonnets. The next day, Camille felt ill. She had a fever and a sore throat. Camille realized she had a cold. The young woman wrote about herself as she realized that it was impossible to be sicker now. After all, it was urgent to earn money to pay tribute to the track. Soon, Evelyn arrived at Camille's house and immediately announced that the labor activity would cease for the time being. Camille, as soon as she heard this with a sad smile, said that these were the words she had expected from Evelyn. In response, she said, "Don't think I'm such a predictable madam. I'll call a doctor and persuade the doctor to put you in the hospital. You don't have to do that. You're a doctor, so treat me with us agreed, but only sick. You will follow all my instructions." With a smile, said Evelyn, specifically addressing Daddy's ward. Camille recovered. 7 days later, she wanted to go to work again, but she was prevented from doing so by a pensioner. The elderly woman said that Camille had not yet recovered from her illness and needed to stay at home for a couple more days. There was nothing left for the girl to do. only to agree with Evelyn's decision. 2 days later, Camille was already standing on the highway. She was thinking about how to raise the necessary amount for Wendy. The young woman realized that she was not ready to go to work every day, but she also realized that it was necessary to give the money. And then one solution came to her mind, that one day it was necessary to double the number of clients, and only she thought about it as a truck stopped in front of her. The girl climbed into the cab and closed the door and then turned to the driver. Immediately, with fear, she faintly shuddered. In front of her sat the man who had robbed her of her innocence. The young woman only wanted to get out of the car. As the young man menacingly ordered her not to move from her seat, and in doing so grabbed her arm, Camille expelled and asked Stephen to let her go. The guy grinned and said that she had willingly got into the vehicle, and then added that you were a pious lady offering your services on the highway. And at that time you did not make a road out of yourself. Well, let's see what you have managed to learn during this time. I can't wait to reminisce with an old acquaintance who picked up during this time of experience. They're gonna let me out of the car. And don't even think that I'm going to have fun with you, and you shouldn't shame me, since it's only to your credit that I'm out here on the highway making a living. You're the one who took my virginity against my will, and I got pregnant afterward. I have a young daughter who needs food, diapers, skates, etc., and my allowance isn't very high. And you knew I was an orphanage kid with no one to stand up for me. So you used your power that day. I hate you. Are you telling me you had my baby? That's an unexpected twist. Don't tell me you want to get child support from me now. You make money on the highway. Somebody got you pregnant, Stephen said defiantly. Even though you're the biological father of the child, I can assure you that we don't need your money. You can choke on your finances, and the fact that you have a daughter you can forget forever. And let's stop this stupid conversation. There's only one thing I don't understand right now. I mean, you're such a big shot, and you work as a trucker. That doesn't make sense. Okay, I don't want to waste my time with you. Let me get out of the car. I can't take care of myself. Camille tried to open the door of the truck, but she was pulled to her by Stephen Force and tried to lift her skirt. The girl screamed in desperation and began to fight back. At that moment, a voice came from behind them. It was a man speaking to the driver. Let her go right now. What are you doing? Partner, you know I like to have fun with the girls on the road, Stephen said in a perplexed voice. You'll find another girl on the way, the man replied. Christopher, you're my partner, but in this case I don't understand you, said Stephen, and let the girl go. In the meantime, Camille glanced back and looked at the protector. He was a handsome middle-aged man who looked her straight in the eye. The girl nodded gratefully and started to open the door of the truck, but she was called by her partner Stephen. The young woman looked back and glanced questioningly at the man. At that moment he took out a purse and took out some bills, which he immediately handed to Camille with the words, "This is enough for you and the little girl for the first time, and try to change your trade. It doesn't suit you. You'd better find another way to make money. Now go home to your daughter, who's sure to miss you." But I can't take the money. Just like that, Camille said. You can. Take it and go. If I see you on the road again, they'll think you're a fallen woman, Christopher said sternly. The young woman took the money and nodded gratefully once more and quickly got out of the car. As soon as the young woman left the cab, the truck started at the same moment. Camille looked at the car and thought about the stranger's words. Camille stood for a while longer and then headed home. The girl thought that there was only one trouble for today. It was the meeting with Stephen, but she was wrong. Camille had just arrived home, so she saw that her neighbor was visiting. Camille said hello to her, but she said nothing and hurried away to her room. The girl looked at her neighbor with a puzzled look. Then she turned to Evelyn. What's the matter with Wendy? I came in and she just ran off. She didn't even say hello, and I thought we'd had no quarrel with her. The pensioner didn't say a word in response. The old woman asked if she had earned it today. Camille girl with a smile replied that she received a good sum for work, and with these words began to take out her purse to show her finances. Camille took out the money and handed it to Evelyn with words, "Here, take at least part of it. I suggest that tomorrow we go to the market together and buy some goodies. How about it?" The pensioner approached the girl and took the money. The old woman studied the bills for a long time and then asked her mockingly what was Camille's task today. Camille immediately sensed a trick in Evelyn's question. She answered that today she was collecting signatures for the advertisement. The old woman laughed and then, with a sharp movement, threw the money in the face of her ward with the words, "Who did you decide to deceive?" And after this phrase, the pensioner snatched from Camille's hands a bag from which to shake out the clothes. Evelyn picked up the fallen short skirt from the floor, as well as a blouse with a deep neckline. The older woman held out the clothes to the girl and said reproachfully, "This is your uniform. When you collect signatures from truckers, don't give me any more fairy tales. Wendy saw you today, driving down the highway with her husband. A neighbor told me you were wearing those clothes when you got into the truck. She also told me that her husband had seen you on the road before. By the way, he's been getting the same shit from you. That you were on a date. How could you do something like that? Tell me, don't you hate what you're doing? Can you imagine what your daughter will think of you when she finds out? I'm ashamed of what you're doing right now. It's like you stabbed me in the back. I didn't expect you to deceive me like that. You." Evelyn shoved things into Camille's hands. Camille and silently went to the kitchen, where she sat down at the table, and not in a coffin, and cried softly. Camille came in after her and tried to hug the older woman, but the latter pushed her away. The girl realized that she had caused her dear one unbearable heartache. She wanted to say something in her defense, but there were no words. Camille knelt down in front of Evelyn and spoke loudly. "It's my fault, and I admit it. I know I have offended you very much, and I have nothing to say for myself. Believe me, I did not go to the track for my own pleasure, but only to survive. Just don't pretend you're poor. There are plenty of single moms who find a way to make ends meet, and they don't go selling their bodies. Like you did, scold me with tears in my eyes directly killed Camille. I won't tell you anything else. I'll just leave now and try to forget that I ever met you. Small pennies. I'll pay you back, but we won't see each other anymore. And you can continue to go out for signatures on the highway," said the old woman, and got up from the table. She wanted to take a step, but could not, for her knees were encompassed by Camille, who cried, sobbing profusely. For a few minutes the girl held Evelyn by the legs, and then raised her face to the pensioner, and through her sobs said, "You may scold me with hurtful words. I bear it all. Just don't cut us out of your life. I promise you, on my knees, that I will never go out on the highway again. I don't know how I'll make a living yet, but believe me, I'll find a way. Just give me one chance. I beg you not to turn your back on us. You know very well that you're the only person we have close to us. I've only now realized what I can't lose. Believe me, I'm truly sorry for what I did, but I did not know how to get out of such a situation when there is no money, sometimes even for bread. I just ask you to believe that the money I brought today, it was not earned in this way. It was given to me by a stranger who saved me from Stephen. And that man gave me a good admonition too, that if he ever sees me on the highway again, he will consider me a fallen woman. He said the right words to you. All right, baby, if you promise me it won't happen again, we'll stick together. We'll try to forget this month completely, like it never happened. Now go see your daughter. I think she's awake," quietly spoke the old woman and stroked the girl's head. In the evening of that day, when the Evelyn players had already left, Camille thought about life. She realized that she had made a promise to the pensioner, and the girl knew that she would keep her word in any case, even if she had to starve. And at the moment, Camille was concerned with another question: where to find a part-time job. Camille spent a long time in her thoughts, and when she looked at the clock, she was surprised that already at 0:00 the young woman came to her daughter and admired the baby. Then the girl shared the bed and lay down. And at that moment, for some reason, she remembered the departure of her neighbor. Now, Camille understood why Wendy had treated her so dryly. Camille decided that she had to talk to the neighbor tomorrow. 10 days passed. Camille kept her promise to Evelyn. Now, when the pensioner came to Camille, the girl went to look for a job. And soon she was lucky to get a job as a dishwasher in a kindergarten. The salary was small, but Camille was happy with the money, and the schedule suited her. Another week flew by and Camille had a day off. The young woman decided to take her child for a walk at lunchtime. She had already started to get things to dress. The doorbell rang. Camille was surprised by it, as she was not expecting anyone, and especially Evelyn knew that she had a day off today and did not come these days. The girl then thought that was right. A neighbor came over to chat and hurriedly opened the door. However, it was not Wendy who turned out to be the evening, but a stranger who held a gorgeous bouquet of pink roses and a large fluffy bear. Camille looked at the man with surprise and immediately recognized him as the man who had given her money for nothing. The landlady was embarrassed to see Stephen's partner and spoke crumpled. "Hello, you must be here for the debt. How did you find me? You have a way of keeping guests on the doorstep. I'm glad you remembered me, though. That means you left a good impression of me. I'm not used to letting strangers into my home." "Oh my goodness," the man exclaimed, and then went on. "We're the ones who don't know each other. Perhaps you don't remember my name, but I remember yours perfectly well because I heard your whole conversation with Stephen. Only after I heard what that man did to you that I did not let him do it again. My name is Christopher, by the way. I remember Stephen calling you Christopher. All right, come on in, but I'm warning you right away, I don't have the money to pay you back at the moment. And one more thing, I don't do that trade anymore. If you'd like to collect your debt in this equivalent, I gave the money freely and from the bottom of my heart. I really wanted you to stop doing this business," said the man and handed the girl flowers and a toy, and then crossed the threshold. "But I don't understand why you came to me," the young woman asked in surprise. "That's an interesting question, but I will answer you now. Initially agree that you will not call me you. Otherwise, I feel like an old man. I'm only 31 years old. Now to answer your question. When I saw you in the car, I was struck by your looks. Then I thought you'd disappear and all my thoughts of you would be gone. But as time went on, I kept thinking about you. Then I realized that Cupid's arrow had accidentally pierced my heart, and thus I stand beside you." After these words, the crying of a child was heard from the room. The young woman rushed into the room. She put the flowers and the toy on the bed and picked up her daughter in her arms. Following the mistress of the apartment followed the guest. The man looked at the little girl and softly said, "It seems to me that with a toy I hurried. You should have bought another set of rattles. Since your daughter is still a baby, you shouldn't have bought anything at all. By the way, my daughter's name is Vanessa. She's 5 months old. I forgot to ask you how you found me. Stephen gave me a beautiful name. He gave me the street, the house, the entrance. I had to find the apartment on my own." "Very interesting. Can you tell me why Stephen is a trucker? I mean, his father's not a poor man. I'd be happy to share. He told me why it happened. But first I'd like you to offer me a seat. That's what hospitable hostesses usually do," the man said with a smile. The young woman hummed with embarrassment and offered the guest a chair, while she sat down on the bed with the baby. The girl turned to Christopher and looked questioningly at the man. The guest realized that he was expected to answer, and so began his story from the narration of the new acquaintance. The landlady learned that Stephen's father's business had failed and had to take a large loan from the bank to restore his own business. However, the finances did not help. Eventually, the business went bust, and there was a debt to the bank. And then it was decided to sell Stephen's apartment to pay off the debt. The young man's father could not bear it all and died suddenly. Stephen was left without money for life, and he had nothing to pay for his studies at the institute. So the guy dropped out of college and got a job as a trucker. Christopher told all this while looking at Camille, who was listening attentively. When the man finished the story, the girl smiled mysteriously, which did not hide from the guest, and he asked, "You must be gloating." "Not at all. I just think that Stephen will now understand how to live on a simple salary and not boast about daddy's money." "You're right about that. Stephen is the sole earner in the family now, since his mother never worked after marrying his father. And from what I understand, my partner's mom isn't going to do it. But I'm not interested in that anymore." "Me neither. We were gonna go for a walk. Go with the duck. You won't mind that. So you're gonna tell me about yourself." And soon the couple and the baby were walking in the park. Christopher told the girl he lived in a one-room apartment. He has been working as a trucker for 6 years. He likes this occupation, and also said that he was married. But the family life did not work out. He said that he likes to guess Japanese crossword puzzles and dreams of visiting the Northern Territory in the future. Hearing the man's last wish, Camille laughed and said, "Everyone wants to go to the South, but you want to go to the North. You are strange. It's very simple. My parents are from there, and they often talk about it. If only you could hear how enthusiastically my mother and father described the North. Why am I telling you this now? I'll get to know them. You'll hear it firsthand. What makes you think I'm going to meet them? Wait a minute. Don't be so quick to say no. It's not like I'm asking you to get into bed. I just want to start by courting you. And if everything turns out well, then we can create a family with you in the future." From the lack of the young man, with a laugh uttered Camille. The couple walked with the child for a while, and then Christopher walked the girl home, helped her carry the stroller to the 3rd floor, and at parting asked permission to call and visit. The girl responded to the young man with consent. A month passed as Christopher visited Camille for the first time. During this time, the couple met several times. They often called each other. The man always inquired about Vanessa's accomplishments to the young woman at each call. It was a pleasure. It didn't take long to fly by. Another month, Camille came home from work and was surprised to hear someone in her apartment speaking in a man's voice. She listened and recognized Christopher's voice. The girl went into the room and saw the man talking sweetly with Evelyn. The old woman saw the girl and said with a smile that Camille had come to visit them. Camille looked at Christopher with surprise, and he immediately knelt down on one knee in front of Camille, took out a small box from the pocket of his jeans, which he opened and handed to the girl with the words, "Here I am making you a marriage proposal. I met Evelyn without your permission and told this worthy woman how I love you. She said she would bless us only after you gave your consent. Now my fate is in your hands." Camille looked at Evelyn, confused initially, and then shifted her gaze to the man. The girl took a box from which she pulled out a thin wedding ring. She slipped the piece of jewelry onto her finger and admired it, taking her hand aside, then looked at Christopher again and asked quietly, "What about my job at the track? That's what you gave me, isn't it? You're going to remind me of that someday, aren't you? What kind of nonsense are you talking about? I believe I met you in a more romantic setting, like the day I first walked into this apartment. Make it look like I got the wrong address. And by the way, Stephen is no longer my partner. I asked management to do that, and they've gone along with it. Now I have a partner who's not considered for the girls. He's a model family man. That's what I'm going to be. As soon as you say yes, what can I tell you? Naturally, I say I want to be your wife," the girl said happily. And at the same moment she found herself in the arms of a man. Christopher tenderly kissed the young woman and quietly in her ear said, "You have now made me with the happiest person. I love you madly, and I will never hurt you or Anya. I will do everything possible so that you do not need anything. We will be a model family. And now you can't refuse to meet your relatives, who already know about you and are eagerly waiting for me to introduce you to them. I understand that you are preparing me to talk to my father and mother about the wonderful northern region, as well as hinting that we will have a joint trip to those lands. That's a good point. "And you are not only beautiful, but also smart." Laughing, Christopher replied, and kissed the young woman on the lips.